year was 1876. The high desert of New Mexico did not care about the ambitions of men, nor did it care about the centennial of a nation claiming ownership over it. The land only cared about heat, wind, and silence. And today, it was reclaiming all three. The silence was the loudest part. It roared in Sarah Coleman's ears, a thick, heavy blanket that smothered the memory of the gunshots and the screaming. There was only the buzz of flies. Drunk on sudden fortune, and the snap of the last burning wagons spoke. Red rock, red sand, and now, redder stains that baked black under the afternoon sun. She had hidden. When the first shot echoed, her father, a man of compasses and maps, had thrown her from the wagon into a dry wash. He had shouted something. She could not remember the words. She only remembered the sudden impact, the scrape of rock against her cheek, and the smell of alkali dust. She was 19 years old. She was the daughter of the lead surveyor for the railroad syndicate. And now, she was the only living soul in a graveyard of 2 wagons and 10 bodies. Sarah pushed her matted hair from her face. Her throat felt packed with clay. She tried to swallow, but there was nothing left to swallow. She crawled from the wash, her calico dress torn at the knee, her hands raw. The scene was wrong. It was still her father's maps. His precious alignments for the coming iron track were scattered across the dirt, fluttering like wounded birds. She saw him. He was near the axle of the lead wagon, his body still, his eyes open to the unforgiving blue sky. His waistcoat, the one she had mended just last week, was dark. She crawled to him. She did not cry. The shock had burned the tears out of her. She touched his hand. It was already cooling. She was alone. The land, this vast, empty, red world, was going to swallow her. She did not see the man approach. He moved like the heat haze, a ripple in the air that solidified into form. One moment there was only the canyon wall. The next, he was there, standing over the wagon, his gaze taking in the slaughter with an unnerving stillness. He was Navajo. He wore buckskin leggings and a faded cotton shirt, the color of the earth. His black hair was tied back with a simple leather thong. He carried a rifle, held low and easy, as if it were part of his arm. He was tall, leaner than the soldiers she had seen, built of sinew and silence. Sarah froze. She was still holding her father's hand. Cale Yazzie looked at the scene. He had seen this before, the work of white men fighting over land that belonged to none of them. He had seen the work of his own people, desperate and pushed to the edge. This, however, had the look of calculation. It was too clean, too fast. His eyes moved over the bodies, the scavenged boxes, and stopped on the girl. She was alive. A flicker of surprise, quickly masked. She was staring at him, her eyes wide with a terror so pure it was almost silent. He walked toward her. He moved slowly, not in comfort, but in assessment. He saw the way she huddled by the man, the surveyor. He recognized the man's equipment, the tripod, the strange seeing glass. These were the men who cut the world into squares. He stopped a few feet away. His face was hard to read, marked by the sun and by a long, thin scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. It was an old wound, silvered by time, a relic from a fight with United States cavalrymen years ago, a fight that had cost him his brother. Sarah tried to speak. A dry rasp came out. "Please." Cale's expression did not change. His gaze swept over her. She was not a threat. She was a child of the invaders. But a child? He unslung the water skin from his shoulder. He did not offer it. He simply opened it and tossed it toward her. It landed softly in the dust near her knee. She stared at the skin, then at him. He was the enemy. Her father had warned her. The savages. But her body betrayed her prejudices. Her hand darted out, clumsy, snatching the skin. She pulled the wooden stopper and drank. The water was warm and tasted of leather and minerals, but it was life. She coughed, the water stinging her raw throat. He watched her. his face impassive. He knew this land. She would be dead by morning. The coyotes would find her, or the heat would... He said nothing. He turned his attention back to the wagons, his eyes tracking the ground. He was reading the story she could not see. The number of horses, the direction they came from, the way they left. He noted the tracks of shod horses mixed with unshod. Complicated. Sarah finished drinking. The water gave her just enough strength to feel the true depth of her fear. "They killed him," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They killed everyone." Cale looked back at her. He knew. He was a man caught between worlds. He lived in the high canyons, with the remnants of his people who had escaped the Long Walk. But he was not fully one of them. Not anymore. Years ago, when the soldiers had rounded up Navajo children to send them to the reservation schools, Cale had intervened. He spoke enough of the white man's tongue. He had negotiated, traded, and argued for the release of 3 children, trading his skill as a scout for their freedom. To the soldiers, he was a temporary tool. To his people, his actions were a stain. He had parlayed with the men who had slaughtered their sheep and burned their peach orchards. He was distrusted. He walked alone. And now he had found this, a white girl, a survivor. He made a decision. It was not born of kindness, but of something more pragmatic. The land demanded balance. Leaving her here was a waste. He walked to his horse, a lean paint pony that had stood patiently 20 yards away. He brought it over. He looked down at Sarah. "You come," he said. His voice was low, rough, like stones grinding together. She recoiled. Who are you?" "You stay, you die." He offered no comfort. She looked at her father, then at the vast, silent desert. The silence was waiting for her. She looked at the Navajo warrior. He was offering an unknown. She chose the unknown. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. The world tilted. Cale sighed, a small sound of impatience. He bent down, in one smooth, powerful motion. He lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. She gasped, her hands flying to his shoulders to steady herself. And then she smelled it. It was not the smell of the massacre, the iron and the dust. It was not the smell of the wagon train, the sweat and old canvas. This was different. It was the smell of cedar, sharp and clean. It was the smell of wood smoke, not from a campfire, but the lingering scent of 1,000 fires, embedded in his skin, his hair. It was the smell of the high country, of pine needles and dry earth. It was the smell of the land itself, the land she had come to map but had never understood. It was the smell of him. He placed her on his horse, seating her in front of him, his arm securely around her waist. She was rigid, her body trembling, but she held on. He clicked his tongue, and the horse moved, stepping carefully around the bodies and the wreckage, heading east, away from the setting sun. They rode for an hour. The red light of dusk bled across the sky, turning the mesas into islands of deep purple. They rode toward Red Mesa, the nearest settlement. It was a raw, new town, balanced on the knife edge of survival. Red Mesa was a collection of plank buildings and hopeful tents, populated by miners, railroad men, and settlers who had come to claim the land the government was offering. It was also a town boiling with tension. The white settlers, angry and fearful, saw the Navajo as a constant threat, a barrier to the progress the railroad promised. The Navajo, pushed from their ancestral valleys, saw the town as an infection, a scar on the Dinetta, their sacred homeland. And whispering through the saloons and the general store was the name of the railroad syndicate. The syndicate was the invisible giant, the source of all the money and all the trouble. It was the syndicate that employed men like Sarah's father. It was the syndicate that wanted a track laid straight through the heart of the canyons, straight through the land the Navajo considered holy. Cale would not take her into the town. He knew what they would do to him. He was Navajo. To them, He was worse than a coyote. He was the enemy. He stopped his horse in a gully 1/2 mile from the dim lights of the settlement. He slid off the horse and reached up for her. Sarah's limbs were stiff. She practically fell into his arms. He set her on her feet, but her legs gave way again. He caught her, his grip firm. She was pressed against his chest for a moment. He was warm, solid. The smell of cedar and smoke enveloped her. A strange, wild comfort. "The town is there," he pointed. "You walk. They will help you." She looked at the lights. They seemed so far. They will ask, "What happened?" "No, you tell them. Apaches, or Comanche. They will believe it." He knew it was not Apaches. The tracks were wrong. "And you?" she asked, her voice small. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes. It was not anger. It was a deep, profound weariness. "I am not welcome." He was turning to leave when she stumbled. She put a hand out to steady herself, grabbing at his shirt. Her other hand, which had been clutching the collar of her dress, opened. A small object, tied on a leather thong around her neck, swung free. It was a piece of turquoise. It was not a polished bead, but a rough, natural-shaped stone, deep blue with a spiderweb of dark matrix. Cale froze. His breath caught in his chest. He had seen men killed. He had fought soldiers. He had starved in the canyons. Nothing had ever stopped his heart like the sight of that stone. His hand moved, faster than she could track. He did not grab the stone. His fingers brushed against her collarbone, his thumb and forefinger closing over the turquoise. His hand was rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly light. He held the stone, feeling its shape, its familiar edges. He knew this stone. He had held it as a child. He had seen it every day, resting against the skin of his mother. A woman killed by soldiers looking for men like him. It was part of a sacred set. The Vong Lin Thatch, the stone circle that protected his people. It had been lost the day she died. He looked at Sarah. He truly looked at her now. Not as a white girl, not as a survivor, but as an impossibility. His gaze was intense, burning through her fear, searching for an answer to a question he could not yet form. He held the stone, his hand resting warm and heavy against her chest, just over her wildly beating heart. He was speechless. She stared up at him, confused by the sudden change, by the heat of his hand through her thin dress. He finally spoke. His voice was not a rasp. It was a whisper, filled with a disbelief that bordered on reverence, and a darkness that bordered on accusation. "Who are you?" he asked, the words barely finding air. "That the sky gave you this—" Cale's hand was heavy on her chest, a solid, living weight that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the turquoise stone he held. His question hung in the dry, cooling air, a thing more powerful than the silence of the massacre around them. "Who are you?" he had asked. "That the sky gave you this—" Sarah stared up at him. The fear that had numbed her was replaced by a sharp, cold confusion. His eyes were no longer weary. They were alight, blazing with an intensity that stripped her bare. She could feel the hard calluses of his fingers, the heat of his palm, separated from her skin by only the thin layer of her dress and chemise. I do not know," she stammered. "It was my father's. A gift." His gaze did not soften. He looked from her face to the stone, then back. He seemed to be listening to something she could not hear, a vibration from the turquoise itself. His decision, when it came, was as swift as his arrival. He did not believe her, or rather, her answer did not matter. The stone mattered. "You cannot go to the town," he said. His voice was final. "But I must," she protested, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "They will help me. The sheriff—" "They will see this." His fingers closed more tightly around the stone. "They will take it. And you—" With a sudden, sharp tug, he snapped the leather thong. Sarah cried out, a small sound of loss. reaching for her neck. He pulled his hand away, opening his palm. The turquoise rested there, dark blue against his skin, pulsing faintly in the twilight. He stared at it, his face a mask of iron-hard reverence. He was a man who had lost his gods. He had just found a piece of one in the dirt, hanging around the neck of his enemy. He slipped the stone into a small leather pouch at his belt. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We go." "No!" She tried to scramble away from him, back toward her father's body. "I will not go with you. I cannot." He was not asking. He lifted her again, ignoring her small cry, and settled her onto the horse. This time, he tied a short rope from his saddle horn and looped it loosely around her wrist. It was not cruel, but it was binding. He mounted behind her, his body a solid wall at her back, his arm once more around her waist. He turned the horse not east, toward the faint lights of Red Mesa, but north, into the labyrinth of canyons, toward the rising moon. Sarah rode as his prisoner. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to run, but where the desert was his home, not hers. The men who had killed her father were out there, and this man, he had given her water. He had spoken of the stone with a strange, fierce pain. She was trapped between a savage land and a savage man. She leaned forward, trying to shrink away from the contact of his chest against her back, but she could feel his breath, steady and warm, stirring her hair. They rode for 2 hours. The moon was high now, a silver coin that washed the red rock in ghost light. Cale navigated the winding washes and narrow game trails with a certainty that was absolute. He was part of the shadows, a man made of the same earth he traveled. He finally stopped at what looked like a solid wall of sandstone. He dismounted, untied her wrist, and lifted her down. Her legs were numb, but she stood, swaying. "Where are we?" Her voice was a dry whisper. He ignored her, pushing aside a thick, dry curtain of brush that concealed a narrow fissure in the rock. It was a dark opening, barely shoulder width. "In here," she balked. "It is a cave." "It is safe." He nudged her forward. She ducked inside. The air was cool, still, and smelled of ancient dust and something animal. It was larger inside than it looked, a small, domed chamber. Cale followed her, his form blocking the moonlight. He struck a flint against steel. Sparks showered onto a pinch of tinder, and a small, precise fire bloomed to life in a circle of blackened stones. The firelight revealed the walls. They were covered in paintings, faded red and yellow ochre shapes. Men with shields, herds of deer, spirals that looked like the wind, and figures with long bodies and strange heads. "This is Coyote's spine," he said, his first words in hours. He sat back on his heels, the firelight carving deep shadows under his cheekbones. A place of stories. He finally looked at her, truly looked at her, his gaze analytical. "The stone, tell me the truth. Where did you get it?" Sarah sank to the floor on the opposite side of the fire, clutching the small satchel she had managed to grab from her father's wagon. "I told you, it was a gift. Gifts have names. Who gave it?" "I do not know," she said, frustrated and weary to her bones. "My father had it years ago, before we came from the east. A woman, an Indian woman. He helped her. She gave it to him. For luck." Cale's eyes narrowed. This was not the story he expected. It was not loot from a raid. It was given. That made it worse. It meant the spirits themselves had chosen this. "It is not for luck. It is one of the 4 stones of the Dine. It is part of the spirit stone circle. It is what holds the land in balance. My mother wore it. It was lost when she was killed by soldiers." Sarah flinched at the flat, cold way he said it. "Killed by soldiers." "It has been gone for 10 winters," he continued, his voice low, hypnotic. "And the land has been sick. The rain does not come. The springs run dry. And the white men come, cutting the earth, because the circle is broken. Because this was lost. He stared at her. And now it is found. On you. The accusation was thick. He saw her as the cause, the walking symbol of the land's sickness. Sarah felt a wave of hopeless anger. I did not ask for it. I did not even know what it was. I am not your enemy. You are your father's daughter. The words hit her harder than a slap. She bent her head, tears finally coming, hot and stinging. She fumbled with the clasp on her satchel. She needed something familiar, something of her own. Her fingers found the leather-bound cover of her father's journal. She pulled it out, holding it to her chest. It was all she had left of him. Cale watched her, his expression unchanging. He saw the book. He was a good man, she whispered, her voice thick. He was a map-maker. He charted the land. He loved this country. He cut it, Cale said. He drew lines on it. He told the railroad where to wound it. No, she cried. She opened the journal, the pages crinkling. He was just a surveyor. He was working for the syndicate, to build a new life. Her voice trailed off. Her eyes had fallen on the last few pages of his journal. His precise, neat handwriting filled the paper. It was not just bearings and elevations. It was a confession. She read, her blood turning to ice. He wrote of his meetings with the syndicate. He wrote of the man in charge, Silas Thorne. He wrote of the pressure, the promises of wealth. And then he wrote of the land itself. September 4th. I have mapped the canyon to Chelly. As they asked, the sacred valley. The Navajo believe it is their heart. Thorne says it is the only way through. They promise me 1,000 acres and a partnership. Sarah looked up at Cale, her face pale. He was watching her, his dark eyes missing nothing. September 10th. I have broken a promise older than maps. The old woman who gave me the stone, she said it would protect me if I honored the land. I have not. I have sold it. I fear what I have done. And then, the last line, scrawled as if in a hurry, dated 2 days ago. If I betray it, this land will not forgive. Sarah's breath hitched. Her father, her kind, gentle father. He was part of it. He was a conspirator. He knew, and he did it anyway. She looked at Cale, her eyes wide with a new, shared horror. He knew, she whispered, the journal open on her lap. He knew it was sacred. He wrote it. He wrote, "This land will not forgive." As she spoke the words aloud in the ancient, painted cave, a strange thing happened. The small fire did not flicker. It sank. The flames suddenly drew downward, turning a sickly blue, as if the earth itself were inhaling them. A low, vibrating moan filled the chamber. It did not come from outside. It came from the rock itself. Cale was on his feet in an instant. He grabbed Sarah by the arm, pulling her up. "What did you do?" he hissed. "Nothing I just read." The moan became a roar. A blast of wind shot out of the cave entrance, followed by a sudden, violent downdraft that extinguished the fire completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. Outside, the clear, starry night vanished. A sound like a screaming woman rose up, the sound of 1,000,000 tons of sand being lifted from the desert floor. Cale dragged her to the cave mouth. Through the curtain of brush, they saw it. A towering wall of red dust, churning against the cliffs, blotting out the moon, the stars, the world. It was a storm, born from a clear sky in a matter of seconds. It was impossible. Cale's grip on her arm tightened until it was painful. He was not looking at the storm. He was looking at her. His mother's turquoise was in the pouch at his belt, but this woman, she was the trigger. The land had heard her father's confession from her lips. "You," he breathed, "you are Taihachi, bad omen. You bring the whirlwind." Sarah trembled, her terror absolute. It was not a storm. It was a judgment. Her father had betrayed the land, and now the land had come for her. The storm raged for an hour, a furious, suffocating scream of wind and grit. Then, as quickly as it had come, it died. The air grew still. The only sound was the settling of dust. In the new, profound silence, Cale heard it. A sound the wind had not made, the scrape of a boot on rock, the clink of a metal spur. He moved, shoving Sarah back into the deepest shadows of the cave. "Do not speak," he commanded, his voice a low growl. He grabbed his rifle. 3 figures appeared at the cave entrance, dark shapes against the pale, dusty moonlight. They were not Navajo. They were white men, their faces wrapped in bandanas, their hats pulled low. They held repeating rifles. "I knowed I saw 'em come this way," one said, his voice a rough gravel. "Before that damnable wind." "Mister, Thorne said to find the girl," another said. "And the maps. She's got 'em." The first man stepped into the cave, peering into the gloom. "Come on out, little lady. We saw the fire." He took another step. "And bring your Injun friend." Cale did not wait. He was a shadow detaching itself from the wall. He did not use the rifle. The flash would blind him. He lunged forward with his knife. The first man grunted. A wet, surprised sound, as Cale's arm sliced across his gun hand, severing tendons. The man screamed and dropped his rifle. The second man fired. Panic shot. The bullet sparked off the cave wall, filling the air with the smell of sulfur and pulverized rock. Sarah screamed. Cale used the first man as a shield, shoving him into the second, and brought his rifle butt around, cracking it against the third man's jaw. The man stumbled back, grabbing for Sarah. He got a fistful of her dress and pulled her into the open, pressing the barrel of his pistol to her temple. "That is enough. Injun, back off, or she dies right here." Silence. Heavy breathing. The drip of blood from the first man's hand. Cale stood very still, 10 feet away. He was breathing hard, his eyes glittering in the faint light. "Let her go," Cale said. "Give me the maps." The man holding Sarah snarled. "The surveyor's book. The girl said she had it." "You take her," Cale said, his voice calm. "And you take the storm. She is bad medicine. The sky turned black when she spoke. You feel it. The land wants her." The man holding Sarah hesitated. His knuckles were white on the gun. He had felt the storm. He had seen it rise from nothing. The settlers were a superstitious bunch, and men who worked for the syndicate were more so. They saw devils in the canyons and ghosts in the dust. "He is lying," the second man said, but his voice wavered. "Am I?" Cale replied. "She is the Red Witch. The land is angry. Take her. See if you live till dawn." The man with the gun looked at Sarah. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her eyes wide with terror. She looked like a witch. He shoved her away from him, hard. She fell to the cave floor. "Keep her!" The man spat. He and his partner grabbed their wounded companion and backed out of the cave entrance. "This is not finished, Mr. Thorne will hear about this. He will have those maps, and he will have that Navajo's scalp." They scrambled away, their footsteps fading into the night. Silence returned to Coyote's spine. Sarah was shaking so hard she could not get her breath. She was alive. Cale did not move for a long moment. He was listening. When he was sure they were gone, he walked to the fire pit and calmly, methodically, began to rebuild the fire. His hands were perfectly steady. When the flames rose again, he looked at her. She was huddled against the far wall, clutching her father's journal to her chest. "You are trouble," he said. It was not an accusation. It was a simple, profound statement of fact. You saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I saved the stone," he corrected her. He sat down. "And the book." She looked at the paintings on the wall, now warm in the firelight. You called me a witch. You told them the land wanted me." "It was the truth," he said simply. "The land spoke. They heard it. You heard it." He looked at her, his gaze holding hers. "You are afraid of me." "Yes," she whispered. "Good," he said. "I am wary of you. You are a ghost. You carry my mother's heart, and you read your father's guilt, and the sky tears itself apart." He pointed to the faint paintings. "This is a holy place, and you have brought your storm to it." The tension was a living thing between them. His suspicion of her was a wall of rock. Her fear of him was a deep chasm. But he had saved her. He had chosen to fight for her, even if it was for his own reasons. And she held the one thing that could prove his people's claim, the confession of the man who had wronged them. She looked at the journal, then at him. "He was wrong," she said, her voice stronger. "My father, he was wrong. And those men, they will come back." "Yes." "What do we do?" she asked, though we hung in the air. Cale looked at the turquoise, which he had pulled from its pouch. He rolled it in his palm. "We survive. At dawn, we move. They will go back to Red Mesa. They will tell their story." And miles away, in the smoky, lamplit confines of the Red Dog Saloon, the two thugs were already telling it. They told of the massacre survivor, the surveyor's daughter. They told of the savage Cale Yazzie, the distrusted Navajo, hiding her. And they told of the impossible storm, the wind that came from a clear sky, the bad medicine the Indian claimed she possessed. By morning, the story would be on every settler's lips, twisted by fear and whiskey. Sarah Coleman, the lone survivor, was not a victim. She was an omen. She was the Red Witch of the Mesa. In the cave, Cale knew this. He had orchestrated it. He had cut her off from her world. She had nowhere to go. She watched him, this strange, silent man who spoke of witches and spirits as if they were weather. He was her only protector. He held out the water skin to her. His hand was steady. "Drink, you will need your strength." She took it. Their fingers brushed. It was the first small step, not of trust, but of a shared, terrible necessity. Silas Thorne did not believe in witches. He believed in capital, political leverage, and the strategic application of force. He sat in his office, a square, plank building at the end of Red Mesa's muddy main street, the only building with glass windows. He was a man of 40 years, with a neatly trimmed beard that did not hide the rigid set of his jaw. He had been a colonel in the cavalry, a man who had seen action at Sand Creek, and he viewed the entire Navajo nation as a logistics problem to be solved. The two men from the cave stood before his desk, muddy, shamed, and one of them clutching a bleeding hand. "A storm," Thorne repeated, his voice quiet, which was far more terrifying than if he had shouted. "From a clear sky, a red witch." He leaned forward, the lamplight glinting off his pale eyes. "You let one half-starved girl and one renegade Navajo, a man who is hunted by his own people, disarm you because of the weather." "You did not see it, Mr. Thorne," the man with the wounded hand insisted, his voice thin with pain and fear. "It was not natural. The air, it screamed." Thorne steepled his fingers. He had personally overseen the ambush of the surveyor's wagon. Coleman had become a liability. The man had developed a conscience, a fatal flaw in this line of work. His journal, filled with his meticulous, honest surveys, was a document that proved Thorne had submitted falsified maps to the federal government. The true survey showed the railroad was charted to run directly through the canyon to Chelly, a violation of the 1868 treaty. Coleman's journal was evidence of fraud and treason, and his daughter now possessed it. "I am not interested in folklore," Thorne said, rising from his chair. He was tall, his posture ramrod straight. "I am interested in that journal. I am interested in silencing the girl who read it, and I am interested in the scalp of Cale Yazzie, The man who thinks he can negotiate with his betters. He looked at the two men with undisguised contempt. Yazzie is an outcast. His own people will not help him. He is alone, with a white woman they now think is a demon. He has nowhere to run. I want every bounty hunter from here to Santa Fe on this. I want trackers. Find them. Bring me the journal. Bring me her. He paused. The Navajo. You can kill where you find him. And the girl, sir. Silas Thorne looked out the window at the red land, dark under the moon. The girl is a tragedy, a lone survivor who wandered into the desert and was, sadly, never seen again. See to it. Cale kicked dust over the last embers of the fire in Coyote's spine. The pre-dawn air was cold, sharp in the lungs. Sarah huddled in her torn dress, clutching her father's journal to her chest. It was no longer a comfort. It was a weight, a testament of guilt. We move, Cale said. He had not slept. He had sat at the cave mouth, listening to the desert settle after its unnatural rage. Where? Sarah asked. Her voice was raw. Not where they look, not the canyons. We go to the high desert, the Malpais, the Badlands. It is empty. Too empty for them. But not for me. And your people, can they help us? Cale looked at her. His expression was grim. My people believe I am a friend of the white man. They believe I traded secrets for safety. And now... He glanced at her. I am seen with a white woman, the red witch who summons a whirlwind. If they find us, they will kill you for bringing the storm. And they will kill me for protecting you. Sarah's last hope evaporated. He was right. They were completely, terribly alone, hunted by her people, and hunted by his. He put her on the horse, and they rode, not north but southeast, into a barren plain of sun-cracked alkali and black volcanic rock. For 3 days, they moved. They traveled mostly at night, hiding during the brutal, sun-drenched days in the slivers of shade offered by rock formations. The land was flat, open, and offered no cover. Sarah had never known such emptiness. It felt like the floor of the ocean, drained of all life. On the second day, the water ran out. By the third morning, Sarah's tongue was swollen, her lips cracked and bleeding. She was walking beside the horse, her hand on the saddle. Stumbling. Cale watched her, his face a hard mask. He was thirsty. She knew, but he showed no sign. She fell. She lay on the hot, sharp rocks. Too tired, too defeated to move. I cannot, she rasped. Leave me. It is what you wanted. He looked down at her. He saw the journal, still tucked inside her dress. He slid off the horse, pulled the empty water skin, and walked away from her, toward a small patch of withered, gray-green scrub. He knelt, his back to her, and began to dig in the dry dirt with his knife. She thought he was digging her grave. She closed her eyes. She woke to the splash of water on her face. Her eyes flew open. Cale was kneeling over her, holding the water skin. It was wet, bulging. Drink, he commanded. She drank. It was not water. It was a thick, bitter, milky liquid. But it was wet. It coated her throat, easing the fire. She drank until he pulled the skin away. What is it? The root, he said, nodding to the scrub. It holds water for the dry times. You learn to see the signs. He pulled her to her feet. From now on, you see, you listen. He became a harsh teacher. He did not offer comfort, only facts. He showed her how to walk on rock, not sand, to leave no track. He showed her how to tell direction from the lean of the stunted junipers. He pointed to the sky. That hawk, he is not hunting. He is circling, waiting for something to die. We go the other way. One morning, he woke her before dawn. The air was cold, the sky a deep purple. He led her to a wide, flat expanse of sandstone. Wait, he said. As the sun's first rays hit the rock, a faint film of moisture appeared. "Do. Use your cloth," he said. She knelt and pressed her torn sleeve to the rock, soaking up the meager moisture, wringing the precious drops into her mouth. It was not enough to satisfy, but it was enough to live. She learned to listen, to the sound of the wind, how it changed when it moved through a narrow canyon, signaling a potential box end, or how it whispered over open ground. Signaling no shelter, she learned to smell the air, to catch the distant, green scent of moisture that meant a spring, or the sharp, alkali scent of a dry bed. She was changing. The desert was stripping away the girl from the east, the surveyor's daughter. It was burning her down to something hard, quiet, and watchful. They had no fire. The nights were colder than she could have imagined. They huddled in small crevices. Sarah wrapped in her thin dress, shivering. Cale sat nearby, his rifle across his knees, a silent, watchful shadow. The only sounds were the wind and the high, lonely howl of a wolf. So far away it sounded like a ghost. Sarah would lie awake, listening to the wolf and to the sound of Cale's breathing. It was the only other heartbeat in the world. On the fourth night, the silence between them finally broke. They were sheltered under a black volcanic overhang, the horse tied nearby. "Why do they call you a friend of the white man?" she asked, her voice quiet. His back was to her. He did not move for a long time. "Because I saved 3 children." She waited. It was after the army burned our valley. They were taking the children to the forts, to the schools, to teach them to be white. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "I knew the land. I knew where the soldiers were weak. I traded. I scouted for their patrol, showed them a pass to avoid an Apache ambush. In return, they let me have the children." "You saved them," she said. "To my people." He turned his head, his profile sharp against the stars. "I helped the army. I wore their blue coat. I spoke their tongue. I traded the Dean's sacred knowledge to save 3 lives. When thousands were lost, it was not a fair trade. They say I am adulterated. But you did the right thing." He looked at her, and his eyes were hollow. "There is no right thing left. There is only what you can live with." He turned away, but the silence was different now. It was filled. Sarah looked at this man. He was hunted by everyone for doing something he thought was right. Later, she found the courage to ask the other question, the one that had burned in her mind since she saw his face in the cave. "The railroad, your hatred for it. Is it just the land?" He was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. "I had a wife," he said. The words dropped into the darkness like stones. Her name was Tala. She was a weaver. She did not know how to fight. She only knew how to make beautiful things. He paused, his breath catching, the first sign of emotion she had ever heard from him. "The first surveyors came, the men with the tripods. Like your father, they came with soldiers. They told us to leave the valley. It was railroad land now. We refused. They returned." He stopped. Sarah held her breath. "I was hunting. I came back. The village was smoke. The soldiers were gone. She was in our hogan. They had shot her, but not before." He choked on the word. She was still holding the shuttle for her loom. She was trying to finish a pattern. They had cut the railroad mark, the 2 iron lines, into the earth beside her. He stood up, walking out into the cold moonlight, his body rigid. "That is the scar you see. It is not from a battle. It is from the first surveyor I found. I killed him. His guards gave me this." He touched the scar on his face. "I have hated them ever since. The smell of them, the sound of their voices." Sarah felt tears slide, hot, down her dirty cheeks. It was not hate she was hearing. It was a pain so deep it had hollowed him out. It was a loss of humanity, a wound that would never, ever heal. Her father, with his maps and his guilt, was part of this. He was one of them. She understood his silence now. It was not empty. It was full. It was full of Tala. He turned back to her, his face a mask of shadows. "Do not," he said, his voice a low growl, "ever speak of this again." He sat back down, a stone's throw away, a man alone in his own private hell. They needed food. The roots were not enough. Cale knew of one place, a high canyon rendezvous point where traders came. It was dangerous, but they had no choice. They arrived at midday, a narrow slot canyon where the wind was quiet. A man was already there, his 2 mules loaded with sacks. He was Mexican, with a wide white smile, a silver tooth, and a pearl-handled revolver. "Cale, amigo," he boomed. "You look like hell. My friend, the wind has not been kind." "Miguel," Cale said, his voice flat. He remained on his horse. "I need food and bullets." Miguel's dark eyes slid past Cale to Sarah. She sat huddled on the ground, trying to be invisible. Miguel's smile widened. He swept his sombrero from his head in a mock bow. "And who is this lovely flower, ah?" He tapped his nose. "I know. The whole territory is buzzing. The Bruja Roja, the Red Witch of Red Mesa. They say you conjured a storm that knocked 2 of Thorn's men flat." Sarah shrank back. "She is with me," Cale said. It was a warning. "I see that," Miguel laughed. "It is a dangerous partnership. No Silas Thorn offers $500 for her return. Alive. And he offers $100 for your scalp. Not alive." He shrugged. "And your own people? They offer 2 horses and a good rifle for you. They want to judge you themselves." "You talk too much," Cale said. He unfastened a small silver concha from his belt and tossed it to him. "Food, ammunition, now." Miguel caught the silver deftly. "Of course, business." He loaded a sack onto Cale's horse. "Jerky, hardtack, beans, and 10 bullets. We are square." His eyes lingered on Sarah again. "You know, Cale, $500 is a lot of money. I could take her. You could walk away." Cale's hand moved to his knife. "Ah, but I am your friend," Miguel said, holding his hands up. "I do not deal with Thorn, a man of honor." He winked at Sarah. "Besides, the witch is more interesting. Good luck, amigos. Stay out of the washes. I heard thunder in the mountains. A flash flood is coming." He tipped his hat and led his mules away, whistling. Cale watched him go. "We cannot trust him." He said Thorn wants me alive," Sarah said, a small flicker of hope. "He wants the journal," Cale said, crushing it. "After he has it, you are a loose end." That night, they were camped in the high rocks. They had jerky. It was tough, salty, and the best meal Sarah had ever had. Cale had taken the first watch. Sarah sat, staring at the vast expanse of stars. She had been processing his story about Tala. She looked at his rigid back. "Cale," she said, her voice soft. He did not turn. "How much?" she asked. "Do you hate my people?" He was silent for a full minute. The wind whispered around the rocks. He looked up at the Milky Way. A slash of light across the black. "I hated them," he said, his voice so low she barely heard it. "I hated the sound of their words, the smell of their soap, the color of their skin." He turned his head. His eyes found hers in the dark, 2 faint points of light. "I hated them," he said, his voice rough with a confusion that matched her own. "Until I met you." She had no answer. The next day, they followed Miguel's advice, staying on the high ridges, avoiding the dry riverbeds, but the ridges ran out. They had to cross a wide, flat arroyo to reach the mountains on the other side. The arroyo bed looked dry, cracked mud and pale sand. Cale dismounted. "We walk. The horse is tired, and the ground is soft." He took the horse's lead. Sarah walked beside him. The air was still, humid, and smelled of wet minerals. She was 10 feet from the far bank when the ground beneath her simply dissolved. She screamed as she plunged into cold, sucking mud up to her waist. It was quicksand, a hidden pocket of floodwater and silt. "Do not move," Cale yelled. "Do not fight it." But her panic was primal. She thrashed, her arms flailing, and she sank deeper, the thick, wet earth closing around her ribs. She was choking, mud filling her mouth. Cale reacted with animal speed. He slammed the horse's picket pin into the hard bank, tied his rope to it, and looped the other end under his own arms. "Grab my hand!" He waded into the mud, his own legs sinking. The pull was incredible. He reached for her, his face a mask of furious effort. She was too far. He lunged, grabbing a fistful of her hair, and pulled her head above the mud. "Grab my shoulder," he roared. She got a desperate grip on his arm. He wrapped his arm around her waist, locking his hands. "Pull!" he yelled at the horse. The horse, trained to pull, leaned back, the rope going taut. Cale used the leverage, planting his feet, his muscles straining against the immense suction. He pulled. Sarah felt her ribs screaming as the mud fought to keep her. With a sound like a giant unstopping a bottle, the quicksand released her. He dragged her, and himself, backward, onto the solid bank. They collapsed, a heap of mud, gasping for air. Sarah was coughing, vomiting mud and water. Cale was on all fours, his breath tearing in and out of his lungs. She finally stopped coughing and rolled over, shaking. He was still there, beside her, covered in the same gray mud that caked her. His face was inches from hers. His eyes were wide, not with anger, but with a raw, stunning intensity. The mask was gone. The silence was gone. There was only the sound of their breathing, ragged and synchronized. She looked at him. He was not the savage. He was not the renegade. He was the man who had just pulled her from her own grave. He was the man who smelled of cedar and smoke. He looked at her. She was not the white woman. She was not the red witch. She was the woman he had just held, whose life had been in his hands. The desert, the hunters, the past, it all fell away. There was only this look. It was no longer about survival. It was something else, something new and terrifying and alive. He held her gaze for a beat longer. Then his expression shuddered. He broke the contact, pushing himself to his feet. He stood, covered in mud, his chest heaving. He offered her a hand. She took it. His grip was strong. He pulled her to her feet. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. Everything had changed. They cleaned themselves at a high, thin spring that trickled from a fissure in the rock. The act was a necessity. The mud from the quicksand would flake off and leave a trail, and the chill of it would sink into their bones. They washed in silence. On opposite sides of the small pool, the unspoken memory of that look, the look of raw life passing between them, hanging heavy in the air. Sarah scrubbed the gray silt from her skin, her hands trembling slightly. Cale washed with an economy of motion, his back to her, but she could feel his awareness. The wall of his hatred and his grief was still there, but she had seen the man behind it, and he knew she had seen him. They left the spring and entered the high plateau, the place the Mexicans called the Desierto Pintado, the painted desert. It was a place of terrible, alien beauty. The land was not red here. It was a violent canvas of colors. Lavender, saffron, deep blood orange, and pale green, stacked in layers, as if the Creator had used the place to clean his brushes. It was vast, empty, and shimmered under a white-hot sky. They were in the open now, truly exposed. The tension returned, a new kind of tension. Cale's teachings became more urgent. He was no longer just teaching her to survive, he was teaching her to think. "The wind," he said, stopping the horse on a ridge that overlooked a valley of purple stone. What is it telling you? Sarah closed her eyes. Lifting her face, the air was moving in two currents, one high and fast, the other low and slow, smelling of dust. It is fast above us, but it is slow down there. Good. The valley is a trap. The air sits. It is hotter than the ridge. It is a place to die. But look, he pointed. See how the high wind moves. It hits that far mesa and curls back. Like water, it tells us there is a pass. The wind is not just air. Sarah, it is a story. It tells you where the rain was born. It tells you where the rocks are warm. He looked at her, his gaze distant. You listen to the way it moves around you. A man's spirit is the same. You do not listen to his words. You listen to the wind he makes when he enters a room. You feel how it changes the air. That is his truth. She listened, and she applied the lesson to him. His wind was no longer the whirlwind he had accused her of bringing. It was not a storm. It was a deep, steady current, slow and powerful, burdened with the memory of winter. They traveled for 2 more days. The desert was relentless. The jerky ran out. The water in their skin was low, hot, and tasted of the alkali. The sun was not a light. It was a physical weight, pressing down, blurring the world at the edges. Sarah, less accustomed to the privation, began to falter. The heat, the lack of food, the constant gnawing fear, it all settled into her bones. A fever began to creep into her blood. She shivered, though the rocks were hot enough to fry meat. I cannot, she whispered, her legs tangling. She slid from the horse's back. Cale caught her before she hit the ground. He swore, a low sound in his own language. He looked at the sky. They were exposed. To stop was death. To keep moving was also death. He half dragged, half carried her to a shallow overhang, a slice of shadow in a canyon wall. It was not a cave, just a depression, but it was shelter. We rest, he said, until the sun is lower. He laid her down. She was shaking, her skin burning. He knew he had to make a fire. They were too weak, and the night would bring a fatal cold. He found a few sticks of dry, dead greasewood, enough for a small, almost smokeless flame. As dusk fell, he lit the fire. Sarah lay on her side, staring into the small, dancing flames. She was delirious, her mind floating free. She was no longer in the desert. She was home, in her father's study, with the smell of paper and tobacco. The flames in the fire pit wavered, coalesced. They twisted into a shape, a face. It was not her father. It was a woman, an older Navajo woman, her hair streaked with gray, her face a map of deep, kind wrinkles. She was sitting, her hands moving, as if at a loom. Sarah watched, mesmerized. The woman looked up from her work, her eyes finding Sarah's. She smiled. A voice entered Sarah's mind. It was not a sound. It was a thought, planted as clearly as if she had spoken it. The turquoise is a heart. It must beat. Who are you? Sarah whispered, her voice a dry rasp. He is my son, the woman in the fire said. She nodded toward Cale, who sat with his back to them, guarding the entrance to the alcove. He has forgotten the song. His heart is full of ash. You must help him remember. I cannot. Sarah wept, the tears hot on her feverish face. I am his enemy. I am white. The woman's smile deepened. The heart has no color. The earth has no color. It is only earth. The image wavered. The flames broke apart. Sarah cried out, a small sound of loss, and fell into a black, feverish sleep. Cale turned. He had seen her talking to the fire. He moved to her side, pressing his hand to her forehead. She was burning. He wet a rag with the last of their water and laid it across her brow. He was a man of the earth. He believed in what he could see, what he could touch. But he was also Den. He lived in a world of signs, a world his logical mind fought against. The storm in the canyon, her father's confession, the sudden appearance of his mother's stone, and now, this, the girl. speaking to a spirit in the fire. He reached into the pouch at his belt and pulled out the turquoise. He held it in his palm. It was warm. Not from his body. It was warm from within, pulsing with a faint, living heat. It had not been warm since his mother died. He stared at the stone, then at the sleeping woman. His world, which had been a simple, hard map of hate and survival, was tilting. He was torn. Was she the Taihachi, the bad omen he had first named her, or was she something else? A messenger, a carrier of his mother's spirit. The confusion was a cold knot in his stomach. He put the stone back in its pouch. He sat and watched her, his fear of what she represented warring with the new, strange tenderness he felt for the life fading in front of him. The fever broke. It took a full day, a day Cale spent guarding her, forcing drops of water between her cracked lips, his mind a turmoil. She woke on the third morning. She was weak, her body hollowed out, but her eyes were clear. She remembered the vision. She looked at Cale, and the last of her fear was gone. They were in trouble. The food was gone. The water was gone. They had to move. "Can you ride?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," she struggled to her feet. That night, a new storm came. It was not a magical whirlwind. It was a real, brutal desert storm, a wall of wind and freezing rain that turned to sleet. The temperature plummeted 40 degrees in an hour. Their shallow alcove was useless. The wind drove the sleet straight in. "We will freeze," Cale stated, his voice tight. He unslung the heavy buffalo hide he used as his ground roll. "We must share it." The words were a flat command, a simple fact of survival. But it was more. It was the first time they would be forced into contact since the quicksand. He spread the hide on the ground, fur side up. "Sit, back to the rock." She obeyed. He sat beside her, so close their shoulders and hips touched. He pulled the other half of the heavy hide over them, tucking it in, creating a small, shared cocoon of warmth. They sat in the dark, shoulder to shoulder, the wind howling outside like a hungry animal. Sarah was shivering, her teeth chattering. Cale was a solid, warm presence beside her, unnervingly still. Suddenly, the wind shifted. A violent, shrieking gust hit the alcove, tearing at their shelter. Above them, a sharp crack echoed, louder than the storm. "Move!" Cale yelled. A section of the overhang, destabilized by the lashing rain, was giving way. A shower of small stones and dirt rained down. Sarah cried out, panicked, scrambling to get away. Tangling in the hide, she stumbled out from under the cover, falling onto the exposed ledge, into the driving sleet. Cale moved. He did not hesitate. He lunged, his arm locking around her waist, yanking her back just as a rock the size of a man's head crashed onto the precise spot where she had been. He did not let her go. He rolled, pulling her tight against his body, covering her with his own as the rockfall continued, a cascade of stone and mud. He grunted as a smaller rock struck his shoulder. Then it was over. The slide stopped. The only sound was the wind, and the hiss of the sleet, and the pounding of their hearts. They were tangled in the buffalo hide, face to face in the pitch dark. His body was a hard, heavy, living shield over hers. She was pressed into the rock wall, his chest crushing hers, his legs tangled with hers. She could feel the solid, steady drumbeat of his heart against her ribs. She inhaled. The scent, it cut through the cold. The fear, the smell of wet rock and ozone. It was him. Cedar, smoke, and the clean, sharp, male scent of his skin. It was the first thing she had recognized in this alien world. It was the only thing that felt real. She was not cold. She was not afraid. Not of the storm. Not of the rocks. Not of Silas Thorne. Not even of the man holding her. She whispered the words before she even knew she was thinking them. "You smell like my type." He went rigid. He did not understand the Eastern slang. "What?" His voice was a rasp, close to her ear. She realized her words made no sense, but she did not care. She tried again, the truth welling up from a place deeper than thought. Your scent." Her voice was a breathy, raw thing. It is my home." The confession struck him with the force of a physical blow. It was too honest. It was too pure. It bypassed his walls, his grief for Tala, his hatred for her people. It was just her. He said nothing. He stared down at her, though he could see nothing but the faint outline of her face in the dark. He felt it, the pouch at his belt, pressed between their bodies. The turquoise stone. It was suddenly impossibly hot, not warm. It was burning like a live coal, radiating heat through the leather, through her dress, through his shirt. His body reacted before his mind. He was drawn to the heat, to the impossible sign. His hand, the one not braced against the rock, moved. It flattened against her sternum. His palm broad and calloused, covering the spot where the stone burned. He was not touching her skin, but he could feel the heat searing his hand, and beneath it, the frantic, terrified, living pulse of her heart. He was, for the first time in his adult life, utterly speechless. He was trapped by her words, by the heat of the stone, by the life beating beneath his hand. She did not pull away. She did not breathe. She just held his gaze in the darkness, feeling the weight of his hand. A heavy, protective, terrifying brand. The moment stretched, suspended in the storm. He broke it. He tore his hand away as if he had been burned by a fire. With a low growl, he rolled off her, turning his back to her, putting a foot of space between them. "We sleep," he said. His voice was thick, strangled. The silence that fell in their small shelter was heavier than any rock, louder than any storm. They lay inches apart, not touching, two stiff, unmoving figures under the hide. Neither of them slept again. Dawn came, gray and brutal. The storm had passed, leaving the desert washed clean, the air sharp and cold. Sarah rose, her body aching. She watched Cale. He would not look at her. He moved with a stiff, angry precision, checking his rifle, scattering the remnants of their fire. He climbed the ridge to scout. Sarah stood, wrapping her arms around herself, feeling the ghost of his hand, a burning imprint on her chest. He returned an hour later. His face was granite. "They are close," he said. His voice was flat, all emotion erased. "How after the storm?" "The mud," he said, kicking a wet rock. "It washes old tracks away, but it holds new ones. They are good trackers. 5 of them, riding hard." He pointed to the south. "They found our tracks from the spring. They will be on this ridge by midday." He checked the load in his rifle. "I will lead them south, into the canyons. The horse is tired, but I am faster on foot in that rock than they are. You will go west." He shoved the last of the hardtack and the empty water skin at her. "Take the journal. Go to Fort Wingate. It is 2 days' walk. Show the journal to the army, to the soldiers." She stared at him, her heart turning to ice. "You are sending me away." "I am saving the book," he said, his eyes on the horizon. "It is the only way." "No." He looked at her, surprised by the cold finality in her voice. "It is not a choice." "Yes, it is," she said, stepping toward him. "You are sending me away because of last night." He flinched, his eyes snapping to hers, blazing with denial. "I am sending you away because you are slow, and you are white. The soldiers at the fort will listen to you. They will kill me on sight. Now go." "They will kill you anyway," she cried, her voice fierce. "Those 5 men, you cannot fight 5 men alone. Not in the open. You said it yourself." "I can," he said, his jaw rigid. "You will not," she said. She was close to him now, close enough to smell the smoke and cedar on his clothes. "I am not leaving. I am not leaving the stone, and I am not leaving you." She touched her chest. "The vision I had, your mother, she said the heart must beat. It cannot beat if you are dead." He stared at her, his astonishment warring with his fury. She was defying him, this pale, soft girl from the east. "You cannot fight," he spat. "You taught me to see. You taught me to listen to the wind," she retorted, her voice shaking but strong. "Now teach me to fight, or fight with me, but I am not running." He looked at her for a long, hard moment. He saw the iron in her spine, an iron he recognized because it matched his own. He was shaken. He did not know this woman. He made a decision, a final test. He reached to his belt and pulled his knife from its sheath. It was a long, heavy-bladed utility knife, worn smooth with use. Lethal. He held it out to her, hilt first. "You want to fight," he said, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You know who hunts us, Silas Thorne, the man who ordered the ambush, the man who killed your father, the man who ordered the slaughter of my wife." He pushed the hilt against her stomach. "If I fall, if they kill me, he will come for you. He will not kill you. Not at first. He will take the journal, and he will take you. You will not die quickly. You will not die like your father." Her eyes were fixed on his. She was trembling, but she did not back away. "Take it," he commanded. "If I die, you put this in your own heart, or you put it in his, but you do not let him take you alive. Do you understand?" She looked from his burning eyes to the worn, leather-wrapped hilt. She saw the memory of Tala. She saw the horror of the massacre. She saw the cold, pale eyes of Silas Thorne, a man she had never met but now hated with her entire being. Her hand, steady, closed around the hilt. The knife was heavy. It was cold. It was a terrible promise. She looked up at him, her gaze clear and cold as the steel she held. "I will not use it on myself," she said. "I will wait, and I will use it on him." She slid the heavy blade into the simple rope belt at her waist. It was the first weapon she had ever held, and for the first time in her life, she had a reason to fight. Cale watched her, a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The test was over. "Good," he said, his voice rough. "Now we teach you how to make them bleed." They did not fight the 5 trackers. They ran, but it was a calculated run, a flight Cale orchestrated. He led them into a maze of slick rock and sandstone fins, a place where the rain-soaked stone held no tracks. He had them dismount, walking the horse through shallow, fast-running water, doubling back on their own trail 3 times until the trackers were hopelessly lost, following a false trail into a box canyon. "They will be angry," Cale said, his voice flat as they watched the trackers, now tiny figures, ride into the trap 5 miles to the south. "But they will be alive. We have bought 1 day." "1 day," Sarah repeated. The knife at her belt felt cold against her skin. "What do we do with it? We cannot run forever. We have no food. The horse is lame." Cale looked north, in the direction of Red Mesa, the town they had fled. "We cannot run," he agreed. He slid from the horse's back, his gaze fixed on the distant, hazy shadow of the mesa. "When a snake is in your hogan, you do not run from the house. You cut off its head." "Thorne," she whispered. "We have your father's journal. It is an accusation. It is not proof." "The proof," he said, "is in his den. The original maps, the ledgers he filed with the land office, the proof that he lied to the government." "Go back." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Back to Red Mesa. They are hunting us. The whole town thinks I am a witch." "They are hunting us in the desert," Cale said, his logic as sharp and cold as the knife he had given her. "They look for a savage and a terrified girl. They do not look for us in the heart of their own town. They will not look for us in the office of Silas Thorne." It was insane. It was brilliant. They traveled only in the deep twilight, hiding the horse in a dry wash 2 miles from the settlement. They approached Red Mesa on foot. After midnight, the town was dark, save for the bright, noisy square of the Red Dog Saloon. Cale moved like smoke, a shadow flowing between other shadows. Sarah, her heart pounding against her ribs, stayed in his footsteps, her body screaming with exhaustion. He found a laundry line behind the mercantile, a plain dark blue work dress and a deep poke bonnet, left out overnight, were a silent offering. "Put these on," he whispered. "You are no longer the surveyor's daughter. You are a washerwoman. Keep your head down." She changed in the darkness of an alley, the smell of lye soap strange and civilized. The bonnet was a blessing, a shield of anonymity. Thorne's office was the new plank building next to the mayor's. It was the only one with a real steel safe visible through the window. Cale did not bother with the door. He moved to the back, to a window. He did not break the glass. He used his knife, his movements precise, working the latch free from its simple frame. He slid the window open. He was inside in a second, a shadow detaching itself from the wall. He reached out, his hand finding hers, and pulled her in after him. The office was dark, smelling of cold cigars, leather, and spilled whiskey. It was the smell of power. "He will have the maps here," Sarah whispered, her eyes adjusting. "He would not let the real ones out of his sight." Cale lit no lamp. He moved by touch, his hands sweeping across the desk. "Locked, all locked."
"The safe," Sarah said.
Cale examined it, running his fingers over the dial. "I cannot open this." "Look for a key, or the combination. My father said men like Thorne are arrogant. They write things down." She fumbled with the desk drawers. They were locked, but the small key was exactly where her father had said it would be, tucked on a small ledge underneath the lip of the desk. She unlocked the center drawer, papers, contracts, and a small, leather-bound book. She opened it. Numbers. "The combination," she breathed. She took it to the safe. Cale stood guard at the window, his rifle ready. Her hands were shaking. She tried the numbers. 1, 15, 6. The tumbler clicked. She pulled the heavy steel door open. It was not gold. It was paper. Rolls of maps, tied with red ribbon, ledgers, and a metal box. She pulled out the first map. "Syndicate Survey, 1875. She unrolled it. Even in the moonlight, she could see the line. The railroad, cutting straight and true, straight through the canyon to Chelly.
"This is it,"
she whispered. "This is the true map, the one he showed my father." She grabbed the metal box. It was unlocked. Inside were letters. She recognized her father's handwriting on one, and on another, the sharp, angular script of Silas Thorne. It was a letter addressed to a man named Hobbs. "Coleman is a liability. His conscience has grown too loud. Retrieve the journal from his wagon. Leave no survivors."
"Oh, God,"
she whispered, the paper trembling. "Cale, he did not just let him die. He ordered it. He murdered my father." A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Cale was moving before the sound finished, shoving Sarah behind the heavy oak desk. He raised his rifle. The door opened. A man stood silhouetted in the moonlight from the hall, his hand on the gun at his hip. He was wearing a tin star. "Matthew," Sarah whispered. Her voice choked. Sheriff Matthew Collins froze. He squinted into the darkness. "Who is there?" He lit the match in his hand, touching it to the wick of the lantern he carried. Light flooded the room. He saw her, her face pale and streaked with dirt, peering over the desk. "Sarah!" His voice was a rasp of disbelief. "My God, we thought... They said the Navajo took you, that you were dead." His gaze shifted, finding the tall, dark figure by the window. His hand dropped to his revolver. "And he is here." Cale did not move. He did not lower the rifle. "Sarah, are you all right?" Collins took a step, his eyes on Cale. "Come away from him. I can protect you. We all thought they are saying terrible things, that you are a witch, that you brought that storm." "It was not him. Matthew," Sarah said, standing up, the map clutched in her hand. "It was Silas Thorne. He killed my father. I have the proof." Collins's gaze fell to the open safe, the papers in her hand, his face, a young, earnest face that had once looked at her with open adoration, hardened. "Sarah, you do not know what you are doing. That is railroad business. It is complicated." "It is murder," she retorted. "Give me the map, Sarah," he said, his voice pleading. "Thorne runs this town. He is the law here. I can talk to him. I can make him see reason. But you cannot fight him. Not like this." Cale spoke, his voice a low growl from the shadows. "You are not the law. You are his dog." Collins flinched. His eyes snapped to Cale. "You keep your mouth shut, renegade. This is white man's business. I'm trying to save her life. He will kill you both for this." "He is already trying," Sarah said. "Then let me help," Collins begged. "Give me the papers. I will keep you safe. I will hide you." "Like you protected her father," Cale mocked. "You wear the star, but you protect the man who pays. You are a coward." "I am a realist," Collins shouted, his hand gripping his gun. "This railroad is progress. It is the future. We all have to make sacrifices for the future." "My people are the sacrifice," Cale said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Her father was the sacrifice. Get out of our way." "I cannot," Collins said, his face pale with sweat. He was trapped. "I cannot let you leave with those papers. Sarah, please." The argument was cut short by a sound from the street, a cold, polite voice. "I believe the young lady has made her choice. Sheriff." Silas Thorne stood in the doorway. He was not alone. Flanking him were two of his trackers, and behind them, his silver tooth gleaming in the hall light, was Miguel. "Miguel," Cale breathed, his voice a knot of fury. "Lo siento, Cale," the trader said, shrugging. "I am a businessman, and Mr. Thorne made a counteroffer. $500 was hard to ignore." Thorne stepped into the room, his eyes pale and cold, landing on the open safe. "An impressive bit of work. Sheriff Collins, I am disappointed. It seems you are consorting with known hostiles and thieves." Collins was frozen, his face ashen. "Mr. Thorne, I was just—" "Arresting them, I hope," Thorne said smoothly. He looked at Sarah. "Miss Coleman, you have property that belongs to me. The map, the ledger, and your father's unfortunate journal. Be a good girl and hand them over." Cale did not wait. He did not speak. He acted. He grabbed the heavy, unlit kerosene lamp from the desk and threw it, not at Thorne, but at the lantern in Collins's hand. The explosion of glass and burning oil was instantaneous. The room erupted in a flash of yellow flame. Collins screamed, dropping the lantern as fire licked up his arm. "The back window," Cale roared, shoving Sarah. Thorne fired into the darkness. The bullet splintered the desk where Cale had been. "Get them!" Cale and Sarah crashed through the window frame, landing in a heap in the muddy alley. Gunshots followed them. They scrambled to their feet and ran. "Where?" Sarah gasped, clutching the precious papers. "The old warehouse, the one by the river. Go." They sprinted, footsteps pounding in the mud. Behind them, shouts and more gunfire. A single shot rang out, from Collins's revolver, but it was aimed at Thorne's men. "Go, Sarah, run!" the sheriff yelled. "A final act of a broken man." They burst through the rotted doors of the grain warehouse, the air inside thick with the smell of mold and old jute. "We are trapped," Sarah panted, her lungs burning. "No," Cale said. He ran to the far wall. "This building, it was the first. It sat over the old arroyo. There is a tunnel." The main doors of the warehouse crashed open. Silas Thorne stood silhouetted against the night, his men fanning out. Miguel was with them. "It is over, Yazzie," Thorne said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Give me the maps, Miss Coleman, and I will let him die quickly. A bullet, not a rope." Cale shoved Sarah toward a dark corner. "There, a trapdoor. Go!" He raised his rifle, firing at the dark shape of Thorne. Thorne dove to the side. The warehouse exploded with gunfire, bullets punching through the thin walls, whining through the darkness. Cale grunted. He stumbled, falling to one knee. "Cale!" Sarah screamed. He was clutching his left shoulder, blood pouring hot and dark between his fingers. He raised his rifle with his good arm, firing again, forcing them to take cover. "The tunnel that leads to the river go." "Not without you!" she cried. She ran to him, grabbing his arm, pulling his dead weight. The knife he had given her banged against her hip. She found the iron ring of the trapdoor, yanking it open. A rush of cold, damp air rose from the blackness. An old, stone-lined tunnel. "I cannot hold them," he gasped, his legs buckling. "You will," she snarled. She put her shoulder under his good arm and pulled him, half falling, into the hole. She slammed the heavy wooden door shut just as a spray of bullets splintered the wood above their heads. They were in absolute, perfect blackness. The air was cold, smelling of damp earth, roots, and decay. Cale slid down the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Go!" he panted. "Leave me. Take the map. Save the land. It is the only way."
"Be quiet,"
she ordered. Her voice was shaking, but it was hard. "Do not move." She fumbled in the dark, her hands finding his shoulder. They came away sticky, wet, and hot. The fabric of his shirt was soaked. "You are bleeding. Too much." "It is nothing." "It is not nothing." She tore a long, thick strip of cloth from her petticoat. Her hands were shaking violently. She had to pack the wound. "Hold still," she whispered, her fingers, slick with his blood. Fumbled to find the hole, the tear in his flesh. He hissed in pain as she pressed the wad of cloth against it. "Tighter," he grunted, his voice strained. She leaned in, putting her shoulder against his, her hands working frantically in the dark to tie the bandage, to make it tight. Her face was inches from his. She could feel his hot, ragged breath on her cheek. I cannot see," she whispered, her hands fumbling with the knot. His good arm came up. His hand found her face in the blackness. It was rough, calloused. His thumb brushed the tears and mud from her cheek. He was not caressing her. He was guiding her, anchoring her. "It is good," he whispered. His hand stayed on her face. They were frozen. Two people in a black, cold tomb. The only sounds were the drip of water, the faint, panicked shouts from the warehouse above, and the pounding of their hearts. "Sarah," he breathed, his voice thick. She did not know who moved first. Maybe neither of them. Maybe the darkness pushed them together. Her lips found his. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not the kiss from a storybook. It was desperate. It was raw. It tasted of his blood, of the alkali dust, of the darkness. It was trembling and it was real. It was a kiss of panic and discovery, a desperate, greedy affirmation of life in a place that smelled of death. She was clinging to him, her fingers tangling in his hair. He was holding her head, his grip fierce, as if she were the only thing anchoring him to the world. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. He was breathing hard, a shudder running through him. "I swore," he whispered, his voice thick with a pain that had nothing to do with his shoulder. "I swore an oath, on my wife's grave. I would never touch a white woman. I would never love one. His voice was agony. Fate does not listen to oaths. Sarah pulled back, just enough to speak. Her voice was a fierce, trembling whisper in the dark. I do not need your forgiveness, Cale, and I do not care about your oath. She found his good hand, the one not clutching his shoulder, and squeezed it. Her grip was as strong as his. I just need you to believe in me, believe in us. He was silent. His breathing began to steady. He was drawing strength from her, from the iron in her voice. They will be guarding the exit, he said. His voice was practical again, but the rawness was still there. What do? We have the map, we have the journal, we have his letters. They are useless if we are dead in a tunnel, he said. He took a long, pained breath. They will expect us to run, to hide in the desert. They will send trackers to the river's mouth. So we do not run, she said, the idea forming, cold and sharp. Thorn, Cale said, the name a curse. He is holding a land auction. Tomorrow, at noon, he's selling our land, my land. He is selling it using the fake map. Sarah finished. A new, terrible silence, a shared understanding. He will be in the open, Cale said. All the settlers will be there, the law, the money, Collins. Collins will be dead or in jail. Thorn will be in complete control. He thinks we are running, Sarah said, her voice hard as steel. He thinks we are wounded and scared. He will be on that stage, in front of everyone, celebrating. Cale's good hand tightened on hers. It is suicide. They will shoot us before we take 10 steps. It is the only way, she said. We do not run. We do not hide. We walk right into the middle of his auction. We show them the map. We show them his letters. We show them him. He could feel her resolve, a force as strong as the one in the stone. He had taught her to see. He had taught her to listen. He had given her a knife. He had not realized he was forging a weapon. Tomorrow, he said, his voice a low, pained growl. At noon, we finish this. The rest of the night was a cold, black eternity. They huddled in the stone-lined tunnel, the damp chill of the earth seeping into their bones, a poor substitute for the freezing sleet they had escaped. The only warmth was the fading memory of their kiss, a desperate shared heat that now felt as distant as the stars. Sarah tore another strip from her petticoat, her hands no longer shaking. Cale sat against the wall, his breathing shallow, his face slick with a cold sweat. His shoulder was a mess. The bullet had gone deep. This is not enough, she whispered, packing the new bandage against the dark, weeping wound. He did not flinch, but a low hiss of pain escaped his teeth. It will be, he said. His voice was a rasp. It has to be. She tied the knot, her fingers sure in the darkness. His blood was on her hands, dark and sticky. It felt like a pact. They sat in silence. Above them, they heard the faint sounds of Red Mesa waking. A rooster crowed. A wagon rattled down the main street, the sounds of a normal world. It felt like a mockery. Sarah clutched the artifacts to her chest, her father's journal, Thorn's incriminating letters, and the rolled, damning map. They were no longer paper. They were a bomb. Thorn has been moving more than just surveyors, Cale said, his voice low, his eyes closed as he fought the pain. He has been stealing from his own company, gold, payroll shipments intended for the army, diverted to his own accounts. It is how he buys men. It is how he bought Miguel. He has it stored in the warehouse. He planned to move it today, after he legally secured the land. The wagon, she breathed. The wagon parked by the warehouse. He will be arrogant today. Cale continued, his voice tight. He thinks we are dead or running, wounded, in the desert. He will be on his stage, surrounded by the people he is cheating, and he will feel like a king. "He will not expect us," she said. "He will expect you to be a victim, a frightened girl." He opened his eyes, the fever and the darkness making them glitter. He found her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "You are not. When the time comes, you are the voice. You hold the truth. You must speak it so the land itself can hear you. I will be the distraction." "What if they shoot you before I speak?" "They will be watching you," he said. "The Red Witch. They will be too stunned to shoot. Until he gives the order. You have until he gives the order." The hours dragged. The air in the tunnel grew stale. Finally, a thin shaft of light from a ventilation grate high above them turned from gray to pale gold. It was noon. They moved, Kale leaning heavily on her. The tunnel exit was a simple wooden grate covered by brush, emptying into the dry, brush-choked arroyo that ran behind the town. They emerged into the blinding, brutal sun. The town was quiet, too quiet. All life had been drawn to the square. The square was packed. It was a sea of straw hats and calico dresses. Miners, settlers, merchants, and their families, all gathered before a newly built wooden platform. On the platform, Silas Thorne stood, flanked by his men. He was wearing a fine black suit, his beard trimmed, his posture impeccable. He was the very picture of progress. He held a hand up for silence, his voice civilized and smooth, carried over the crowd. "Friends, pioneers today. We secure our future for too long. This territory has been held back by superstition and red tape, but no longer." He unrolled a large, professionally drawn map, the fake one. "By the power vested in me by the railroad syndicate, and with the full approval of the territorial government, I am proud to announce that these prime territories," he swept a hand toward the distant canyons, "are now legally acquired. They are open for settlement, open for prosperity." The crowd roared its approval. An auctioneer stepped forward, holding a gavel. "We will start the bidding on Lot 1, the North Quadrant. You are selling stolen land." The voice was high, clear, and cut through the din like a razor. The crowd turned. Sarah Coleman walked out from the alleyway, into the center of the square. She was not the girl from the wagon. She was not the ghost they whispered about. Her hair was matted, her dress stained with dirt and Kale's blood. The knife he had given her was pushed through her rope belt. Her face was a pale, hard mask of fury. A collective gasp went through the crowd. This was the girl Thorne had mourned, the survivor lost to the desert. Silas Thorne's face went white. The blood drained from it, replaced by a surge of dark, cold fury. "Miss Coleman," he said, his voice dangerously smooth, "you are clearly unwell. You have suffered a terrible ordeal." He nodded to his men. "Please, someone, seize her. Get her to a doctor." Miguel, standing near the platform with two of Thorne's trackers, raised his rifle. "I am not unwell," Sarah shouted, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "I am a witness. He is a liar." She held up her father's journal. "This was my father's book, John Coleman, your chief surveyor. He wrote the truth in it." The crowd murmured, confused, shifting. "He is a murderer," Sarah screamed, and the word hung, shocking, in the hot air. She unrolled the true map, the one from Thorne's safe. "This is my father's true map. The one Thorne hid it shows the railroad line running straight through the Canyon de Chelly. A violation of the treaty, a federal crime." The crowd was silent now, watching. "And this," she cried, holding up the letter, her hands shaking. "This is Silas Thorne's own hand, ordering my father's death, ordering the massacre of his wagon, leave no survivors." "She is raving," Thorne roared, his composure shattering. "She is a witch, driven mad by the savage who captured her. She is in league with Kale Yazzie." "And I am here?" The voice came from the other side of the square. Kale stepped out from the shadow of the warehouse. He was pale, his left arm bound tightly to his chest, but he was on his feet. He held a long rope in his good right hand. All eyes snapped to him, the hated renegade, the friend of the white man. He speaks of prosperity. Cale called out, his voice a low growl that carried across the stunned silence. He speaks of the future. Let me show you what his future is built on. He yanked the rope. The heavy canvas tarp covering the freight wagon beside him tore free and fell to the ground with a heavy whoosh. The wagon was not full of grain. It was stacked with wooden chests. One had been broken open, and spilling from it was a river of gold bars, gleaming dully in the sun. A man in the crowd, a freighter, yelled, "That is Army gold. That is the payroll shipment that was stolen near Santa Fe." The square exploded. It was not confusion. It was rage. The settlers were poor. They had fought for this land. And Thorn, this rich man in a suit, was not just a land grabber. He was a common thief. "Kill them!" Thorn screamed, his civilized mask gone. He drew his own revolver. "Kill them both. They are outlaws. Fire." Miguel and the trackers opened fire on the crowd. Chaos. Women screamed. Men cursed, diving for cover, some pulling their own pistols. The settlers who had come to buy land were suddenly in a war. Miners who hated the syndicate fired back at Thorn's men. Sarah was exposed, a target in the center of the square. Miguel, his face a snarl, leveled his rifle, taking careful aim at her. "Sarah, get down!" A body slammed into her, tackling her to the ground, pushing her behind a heavy wooden water trough. It was Sheriff Matthew Collins. His face was badly bruised, his tin star pinned to a torn shirt. He had just saved her. A bullet, meant for her, tore through his back with a wet thud.
Matthew,
she screamed, clutching him as they fell. He gasped, his body arching. I could not stop him. He choked, his eyes wide, looking at her. "He put me in my own cell. I got out. I found—" He shoved a small, thick black ledger into her hands. His private book, the bribes, the accounts, everything. He coughed, and blood spattered her face. "He is the devil. Sarah, make him pay." His head fell back. His eyes stared, unseeing, at the blue sky. Sheriff Collins was dead. Cale was moving. He was a warrior, wounded or not. He used the chaos. His rifle was in his good hand. He moved from wagon to wagon, a deadly, limping shadow. He fired. One of Thorn's trackers spun and fell. He fired again. The second one dropped. Silas Thorn saw it all dissolving. His land, his gold, his future. He was not a businessman anymore. He was a cornered animal. He saw Cale moving, trying to get to Sarah, and he intercepted him. Cale saw him too late. He tried to raise his rifle, but his wounded left arm, the one he needed to support the barrel, was useless. He was too slow. Thorn stepped out from behind a wagon, his face a mask of pure hate. He pressed the barrel of his revolver directly against Cale's left temple. "It is over, savage!" Thorn hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "You lose. You lose the land. You lose your life, and you get to watch her die." He smiled, raising his other hand, which held a second revolver. He aimed it across the square, at Sarah, who was just rising from behind the trough, clutching the new ledger. Cale closed his eyes, his body rigid. A single shot cracked through the square. It was not from Thorn's gun. Thorn's smile froze. His eyes widened, a look of profound, stupid shock. He grunted, a soft, surprised sound. He looked down. A small, dark hole had appeared on his pristine white shirt, just over his heart. He looked up, across the square. Sarah was standing. Her arms were outstretched. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold the pistol. It was Matthew Collins' gun. She had pulled it from his dead hand. Her eyes were squeezed shut. But she had fired. Thorn stumbled, clutching his chest. He did not fall. He was too full of hate. He snarled, a low animal sound, and raised his gun again, to finish Cale. He never fired. A new sound entered the world. It was not gunfire. It was not screaming. It was a low, subsonic moan, a vibration that came from the earth itself, the same sound from the canyon. It rose, becoming a high, shrieking wail. The sky, a moment before a perfect, clear blue, vanished. It was replaced by a churning, boiling wall of yellow and red. The wind did not rise. It struck. It hit the square like a physical fist. The sandstorm. The impossible storm. "The witch!" a man screamed, just before the dust swallowed him. The world ended. People were screaming, blinded, suffocated by the stinging sand. Horses reared, tearing wagons apart. The air was gone, replaced by a roaring, abrasive cloud. The land itself, furious at the blood, the greed, the lies, had come. After being knocked off his feet by the initial blast, Cale lost sight of Thorn. He could only hear the roar of the wind. "Sarah!" he yelled, but the sound was stolen from his mouth. Sarah was on her knees, blinded, choking, clutching the ledgers. "Cale!" Silas Thorn, clutching his chest, his empire in ruins, stared into the red, screaming maw of the storm. He coughed, spitting blood. He did not run for cover. He was a man consumed by his own fury. He gave one last look of pure hatred toward where he had last seen Sarah, then turned and staggered into the blinding dust, vanishing like a demon returning to hell. Sarah collapsed, the world dissolving. A hand grabbed her arm. It was Cale. He was crawling, his face a mask of blood and grit. He did not lift her. He pulled his body over hers, shielding her, pressing her flat to the ground. He had done it in the rockfall. He was doing it now. She huddled beneath him, her face pressed against the rough fabric of his shirt. He was gasping, his wound torn open, his blood, hot and wet, dripping onto her. His blood, her father's blood. Matthew's blood, it was all mixing in the red dust, the angry sand of the high desert. She held on to him, and he held on to her. They were two small, living things, buried at the heart of the land's own terrible judgment. The world returned, not in a rush, but in a slow, suffocating realization. The wind did not die. It simply left. One moment, the air was a solid, screaming thing, and the next, there was only a profound, heavy silence, thick with the taste of grit. Sarah gasped, inhaling a lungful of fine, powdery dust. She was buried. She pushed, panicked, and the weight above her shifted. It was Cale. He rolled off her, a single, agonized groan tearing from his chest, and collapsed onto his back. The Red Mesa town square was gone. It was a field of dunes, an alien landscape of red sand and debris, overturned wagons, broken furniture, and the dark, still shapes of bodies, half buried, dotted the new landscape. The sun, weak and hazy, filtered through the thick red dust that still hung in the air, bathing the world in a sick, apocalyptic light. Sarah sat up, spitting mud. She was alive. She looked at Cale. He was not moving. His face was a mask of blood and dirt. His eyes closed. His chest was soaked. The bandage she had tied in the tunnel was gone, and the wound in his shoulder was a dark, open mouth. "Cale," she whispered. She shook him. "Cale." He did not respond. From the wrecked buildings, the survivors began to emerge. They were not men. They were ghosts, caked in red dust, their eyes wide with the primal terror of having survived the end of the world. They stared at the devastation, at the gold bars scattered and half buried, gleaming uselessly in the sand. Then they saw her. The witch. She was sitting in the center of the square, next to the bleeding, unconscious body of the Navajo, the man who had started the riot. She was untouched. A man, his face raw from the wind, pointed. "It was her, she did this. She called it the Bruja Roja." The fear, directionless and mad, found its target. It was not Thorn. Thorn was gone, swallowed by the storm. It was not the gold. It was her, the supernatural. "She killed us," another man shouted, stumbling toward her. "She brought hell to Red Mesa." "And him," a woman shrieked, pointing at Cale. "The renegade. He started the shooting. He incited this. He brought her here." They advanced, a small, shuffling mob, their faces twisted with grief and terror. "No!" Sarah scrambled to her feet, holding up the ledgers, the papers still miraculously clutched in her hand. "It was Thorn. He stole the gold. He killed Matthew. He murdered my father. Here is the proof." The man slapped the papers from her hand. They scattered into the dust. "Proof we saw what we saw. We saw the sky turn black when you spoke." They grabbed her. Rough hands tore at her dress. She cried out. They dragged Cale's unconscious body from the dirt. "Get a rope," someone yelled. "We hang the savage and we burn the witch." "Stop," a new voice commanded. It was a deputy, a man Sarah did not know, his face pale, but his gun drawn. "That is enough. There has been enough killing." He was just a boy, maybe 20 years old. "He is an outlaw, Hayes, and he is wounded," Deputy Hayes said, his voice shaking. "He is not going anywhere. He will stand trial, a legal trial, for inciting a riot and for the murder of Mr. Thorn's men." He looked at Cale's body. "If he lives that long." They dragged Cale's body toward the jail, a limp, bleeding weight. The crowd turned back to Sarah. "What about her?" She is banished," Hayes said, looking at Sarah with a mixture of fear and pity. "The town cannot hold her. She is not welcome here. Get out." "I have the proof," she cried again, scrambling to retrieve the mud-caked ledgers. "You must listen." "Go!" the deputy yelled, gesturing with his gun. "Go, before they change their minds. Get out of Red Mesa." A hand grabbed Sarah's arm. It was not rough. It was firm. She turned, terrified. It was an old Navajo woman, her face a mass of wrinkles, her eyes sharp and intelligent. She was dressed in the simple clothes of the town's washerwomen. "This way, child," the woman whispered. "Quickly, before their fear turns back to murder." "But Cale—" "He is in their hands. You are in mine. Come." The woman, Donna Rosa, pulled Sarah into the chaos of the alleys, away from the square. She led her to a small, clean shack at the edge of the Navajo camp, a place the settlers had not dared to burn. She pushed Sarah inside and barred the door. "You stay here," Donna Rosa said, her English perfect. "You are the lightning rod. They have put all their fear on you." "They took him," Sarah whispered, sinking to the dirt floor, her body finally surrendering to shock. "They will kill him." "He is strong," the old woman said, looking at her with an unnerving calm. "But he is only one man. You hold the thunder." She pointed to the ledgers Sarah still clutched. "That is your weapon. A man in a cell is forgotten. The truth, in the right hands, is not." Cale woke to the smell of rust and despair. He was on a cot, in the dark. The world was a spinning vortex of pain. His entire left side was on fire. He tried to move, and a wave of blackness crashed over him. He was in the Red Mesa jail, in the cell where Collins had died. He drifted. The fever took him. He was in the high canyons again, the air clean and cold. His mother was there. She was weaving, her hands moving, the shuttle flying. "They have me," he whispered. "The coyote is caught," she replied, her voice the sound of the wind through the pines. "But the trap is not strong." "I failed. I tried to kill him. I could not stop him. The hate, it was not enough." "Hate is a stone. My son, you cannot build with it. You can only throw it." His mother stopped weaving. She looked at him, her eyes sad. You were a warrior. You fought for the dead, for Tala, for me. I fought for our land. No, you fought for our ghosts. She rose, her hands smelling of wool and juniper. The land does not need another warrior. It does not need more blood. The land needs a guardian. It needs a voice. It needs a heart. The stone, he breathed. The stone is the heart, but the girl is the voice. You guarded her. You protected her. That was the first time you fought for the living. The land does not need your death. Kale Yazi, it needs you to live. The vision faded. He was back in the cell. The fever was burning him alive, but the hate, the cold, hard rock of vengeance that had filled his chest for 10 years was gone. It had been replaced by a new, burning urgency. It was not about Thorn. It was about her, Sarah. Sarah stayed hidden with Donna Rosa for 2 days. The old woman moved through the ruined town, a ghost, listening. She brought back news. Thorn is not dead, she said, her face grim. He was wounded, badly, but he is alive. He has retreated to the railroad camp. Gathering his men, he has put a bounty on you, $1,000, dead or alive. And Kale? He is dying, the fever. They have no doctor. They give him whiskey for the pain. Deputy Hayes just waits for him to die. Donna Rosa looked at Sarah. And a new man has arrived? A circuit judge. Judge Miles. He has come to investigate the riot and the stolen gold. He is at the hotel. He is an honest man. Thorn cannot buy him. The thunder. Sarah looked at the ledgers. I have to get these to him. They are watching the town for you, Donna Rosa warned. They are watching for the Red Witch. Then I will not be the Red Witch. Donna Rosa found her a clean dress, a simple gray cotton. She found her a bucket of lye soap and dirty laundry from the hotel. Sarah scrubbed her face clean, braided her hair, and pulled a shawl over her head. She was no longer a witch. She was a servant. She walked straight to the hotel in the middle of the day. Her heart was a cold stone in her chest. She kept her head down. She walked past 2 of Thorn's men in the lobby. They were looking for a wild-eyed, blood-stained woman. They did not even see the laundress. She was told the judge's room was on the 2nd floor. She knocked. Enter. Judge Miles was a tall, thin man with a stern face and clear, intelligent eyes. He looked up from his desk, annoyed. What is it? The laundry, sir, Sarah stammered. I did not ask for laundry. Leave it. Please, sir. Sarah closed the door, her back to it. She dropped the laundry. She held out the 3 books, her father's, Thorn's, and Collins's. My name is Sarah Coleman, and this is the proof. The judge stared at her, then at the books. He took them. He opened the first one. He was silent for 10 minutes. He did not look up. He just read. When he finished, he looked at her. His face was granite. I have heard stories about you. Miss Coleman, none of them did you justice. It is the truth, she said. Yes, he said, tapping the ledgers. I believe it is. This is treason. This is murder. This is grand larceny. With this, I can telegraph the marshals. I can have the army seize the syndicate's assets. I can stop Thorn. He is going to kill Kale Yazi, Sarah said, her voice breaking. He is dying in the jail. You have to help him. The Navajo. The judge frowned. He is charged with inciting this riot. Witnesses say he fired first. He fired to show them the gold. He fired to stop Thorn. He is innocent. Innocence is a difficult thing to prove in this territory. Miss Coleman, especially for a Navajo. The judge stood. I will act on this, but I need time. I have to wait for the marshals. Until then, Thorn is still the most powerful man here, and Kale Yazi is in his jail. You must remain hidden. Do not go near that jail. Do you understand? It is the most dangerous place in the world for you." Sarah left. She understood. The judge would save the land, but he would not save the man. She returned to Donna Rosa's shack, her mind a cold, hard knot. She had to get him out. She was sitting in the dark when the door opened. She reached for the knife at her belt. "Do not cut me, bruja," a voice said. "I am here to help." Miguel stepped into the room. His pearl-handled revolver was in his hand. His silver tooth was gone, and his smile with it. He looked tired. "You," Sarah spat, pressing herself against the wall. "You sold us." "I did," he said. He did not look ashamed. He looked practical. "I am a businessman, and it was bad business." He sat down, uninvited. "I did not sign on for that." He gestured toward the ruined town. "I saw the storm. Chica, I saw the sky eat the town. That was not man's work. That was God's work. And I was on the wrong side." "What do you want?" "To balance the books," he said. "I took Thorne's $500. I help you get your man out. And I give the money to Donna Rosa to help the Navajo. Then I am square. With you. With God. And I get out of this cursed territory." Sarah stared at him. She did not trust him, but she had no one else. "How?" Miguel's smile almost returned. "The deputy, Hayes. He is a boy. He is scared. And he likes to drink. I am his friend. I will bring him a bottle. And I will switch his gun. The one in his holster will be empty." He pulled a second, identical revolver from his belt. "This one." "A distraction," Sarah said, her mind working. "The town is a tinderbox. They are all terrified of another attack." "A fire," Miguel said, nodding. "The old livery stable. It is full of dry hay. It will go up like a torch. When they run to the fire, you go to the jail." He handed her a ring of keys. "I already borrowed these from the deputy's desk. He is not a very careful boy." The plan was set. They would move just before midnight. The rain started at 11. It was not a storm, just a cold, miserable drizzle that turned the dusty streets to a thick, red paste. It would keep people indoors. Miguel went to the jail, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. Sarah, hidden in the shadows, crept to the livery stable. She struck one match. The dry hay caught, smoldered, and then, with a whoosh, erupted in flame. "Fire!" she screamed, and ran. The town, already on edge, exploded in panic. Men poured out of the saloon, shouting. Deputy Hayes burst out of the jail office, his face flushed with whiskey, fumbling for the gun at his hip. "Stay here. Miguel, watch the prisoner." Miguel smiled, checking the empty revolver at the deputy's belt. "Of course, amigo." As soon as Hayes ran toward the fire, Sarah slipped into the jail. Cale was in the last cell, a dark shape on the cot. He was unconscious. "Cale," she whispered, her hands shaking as she worked the key in the lock. The door creaked open. "Cale, we have to go." She put her arms under his, pulling him up. He was dead weight, his body burning with fever. He groaned, his head rolling. "Sarah," he breathed, his eyes fluttering. The land." "The land is safe," she whispered, pulling his good arm over her shoulder, taking his weight. "The judge has the proof. Now we save you." She half dragged, half carried him out of the jail. Miguel was there, with 2 horses. "They are at the fire," he said, helping her lift Cale onto the saddle. "You have maybe 5 minutes." Sarah mounted her horse, holding Cale's reins. "Go north." Miguel said, "Follow the river. It is flooding. It is the only way to hide your tracks in this mud. God be with you, bruja." "Thank you, Miguel," she said. He just nodded. "We are square." He vanished into the alleys. Sarah kicked her horse, pulling Cale's along. They rode, not fast, but steady, out of the chaos of Red Mesa, into the dark, Rainy night. The lightning started, splitting the sky, illuminating the world in brief. Stark flashes. She saw Cale, slumped over his horse's neck, a living ghost. They were free. They were two fugitives, riding into a storm, the symbol of their new, terrible liberty. They reached the riverbank. It was not a river, it was a monster. A churning, roaring torrent of red, muddy water, swollen by the rains, carrying whole trees in its current. "We have to cross," Sarah yelled over the roar. A shot rang out. The bullet sang past her ear, so close it tugged her hair. She screamed. In a flash of lightning, she saw him. Silas Thorne. He was standing on a low ridge, not 30 yards away. He was a nightmare. His fine suit was gone, replaced by muddy, torn clothes. He was caked in filth. His left arm was in a crude sling, and he held a heavy buffalo rifle in his right. He was holding his chest, and his face was a mask of pale, wet, demonic fury. "You!" he roared, his voice barely audible over the storm. "You took it all, the witch, you ruined me." He raised the heavy rifle, steadying it on his hip, taking careful aim at Sarah's chest. She was frozen. She had no gun. She had only the knife. She did not see Cale move. He was barely conscious, but he heard the shot. He heard her scream. He heard Thorne's voice. He was a guardian. He roared, a sound that was not human, a pure, animal cry of protection. He kicked his horse, shoving it sideways, slamming it into Sarah's mount. He threw himself from his saddle, launching his body across the small space, tackling her. Thorne fired. The heavy-caliber bullet hit Cale square in the back, the impact a brutal, wet thud. His body arched against hers, a violent final spasm. He cried out, his arms locking around her, his head buried in her shoulder. The force of the impact, combined with their momentum, was too much. The muddy riverbank gave way. They fell, locked together, into the roaring, red flood. The icy water swallowed them instantly. Silas Thorne stood on the ridge, his rifle smoking, laughing into the rain. Miguel, watching from a ridge half a mile away, saw them go. He crossed himself. He could not tell if they were alive or dead. The river had taken them. The land had swallowed them whole. The river was a cold, red death. It took them, tumbling them in the black, icy water, robbing them of breath, direction, and life. Sarah clung to Cale, her arms locked around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. Even as the bullet that had torn through his back drove him into her, they were bound together by his sacrifice. The water was a roaring noise, a violent, crushing force. She felt him go limp, his weight a dead thing pulling her down. She fought, her legs kicking, her lungs burning, but the current was too strong. She was holding a dead man. She was drowning. A log, part of the debris from the flood, slammed into her, breaking her grip. She was torn away from him. She gasped, inhaling mud and water, and the blackness took her. 1 week later, the town of Red Mesa was a field of ashes and mud. The great sandstorm, followed by the floods, had scoured the town, leaving only skeletal structures and a population stunned into silence. The survivors were busy burying their dead. Judge Miles had arrived with 2 federal marshals, establishing a fragile order, poring over the ledgers Sarah had delivered. But the fear had not left. On the 7th day, a new sound came from the high mesas, a sound that was not the wind. It was a drum. It was a slow, steady, hollow beat. Thump, thump, thump. It was a sound the settlers had only heard in their nightmares. It was a Navajo drum. The people of Red Mesa stopped their work. They looked at the red cliffs, their faces pale. The sound was not a war call. It was deeper. It was a heart. It was the signal that a warrior, one thought lost, had returned to his people. Cale Yazzie was not dead. The river had thrown them, miles apart, onto a muddy bank downstream. Sarah had been found first, near drowned, by Donna Rosa, who had been searching for her. She had woken in the old woman's hogan, her body a map of bruises, the knife still at her belt. Cale had been found 2 days later, washed into a pile of driftwood. Half a mile further downriver, he was found by the very men who had once called him a traitor. They found him, saw the new wound in his back, the third near-fatal injury, and they recognized the sacrifice. Donna Rosa had already told the story of the auction, of the maps, of how Cale had stood against Thorn to protect the den. He was no longer a friend of the white man. He was a guardian. They had carried him to their sacred healing place, a hidden canyon where the air was pure. The medicine man worked for 3 days, chanting, using herbs to draw the fever from the 2 bullet wounds and the sickness from his lungs. Cale lived, but he was broken. The bullet from Thorn's rifle, the heavy-caliber slug, had shattered 2 ribs after punching through his back. It had missed his spine by less than an inch. He was alive, but he was pinned to the earth, a man who could not stand. Sarah found him there. Donna Rosa had guided her to the camp, a place of quiet, hidden industry. The people looked at her, this white woman, with a new expression. It was not hatred, it was awe. She was the Red Witch. She was the one who had brought the storm. She was the one the guardian had died protecting. She walked past them, following the sound of the healer's rattle. She found him lying on a buffalo hide, not inside a hogan, but in the open air, under the shade of a sheer sandstone cliff. She stopped. He was so still. His face was gaunt, his skin stretched tight over his high cheekbones. His eyes were closed, his chest, wrapped in clean bandages of torn linen and herbs, rose and fell with a shallow, painful rhythm. She knelt beside him, her hand hovering over his, afraid to touch him. His eyes opened. They were not filled with fever. They were not blazing with hate. They were just his, clear, dark, and weary. He looked at her, and a small, slow spark returned to them. "Sarah," he breathed. The word was a puff of air. Tears, hot and immediate, welled in her eyes. "I thought you were dead. I lost you in the water." "The river," he whispered, "was not finished with me." She looked around. The ground here was not red mud. It was gray-white ash, the remnant of an ancient fire. And pushing up through the ash, right beside his pallet, was a single, green, defiant stalk of a cactus, crowned with a shockingly bright, waxy red flower, new life, born from the cinders. She touched his hand. His fingers, weak, closed around hers. "Thorn," she said, her voice hard. "He is alive." Cale's eyes did not change. "I know. Donna Rosa told me. He is at the cut, the new line." The news had spread. Judge Miles, with his 2 marshals, had found his legal power meant nothing. Silas Thorn, wounded, his lung likely pierced by the bullets Sarah had fired, was a man consumed by a final, insane fury. He had rallied the remainder of his men, a small army of paid gunslingers. He had ignored the judge's warrant. He was at the new railroad cut, the deep scar his men had been blasting into the earth, and he was working them day and night. He was laying track, a desperate, mad dash to finish his line, to connect the railroad before the army could mobilize and stop him. "The judge cannot stop him," Sarah said. "His men are too strong. The army will be weeks. By then, the track will be laid. He will have won." Cale was silent. He looked at the red flower. "A man cannot win against the land. He can only wound it." "He is wounding it. Cale, he is killing it. And he is laughing." She gripped his hand. We have to stop him." Cale tried to push himself up on his good elbow. A sharp, wet gasp of pain tore out of him, and he collapsed, his face gray. "I cannot," he choked. "I cannot stand. I am broken." "I know." she said. She leaned over him, her voice a low, fierce whisper, the one she had used in the tunnel. I will be your legs, I will be your arm, but you must be the heart, you must be the guide. We finish this, we finish it for your mother, for my father, for Matthew. He looked up at her. He saw the woman who had held a gun in her shaking hands and fired it. He saw the woman who had faced down a mob. He saw the woman who had kissed him in the dark. He nodded. A single, slow movement. One last time. They rode. It was a mockery of their first flight. Cale was tied to his saddle. His body slumped. His eyes closed against the agony of the horse's gentle walk. Sarah rode beside him, leading his mount, her face set like stone. Donna Rosa and two of the Navajo men, the ones who had found Cale, followed at a distance. They were his honor guard. It took them a full day to reach the cut. It was a deep, raw wound in the earth, a canyon blasted from red rock. The sun, high and white, beat down into it, turning the floor into a furnace. The thud of sledgehammers echoed off the walls. Men, sweating and cursing, were laying the heavy wooden ties, spiking the iron rails. At the end of the line, overseeing it all, was Silas Thorne. He looked like a corpse. He was gaunt, his skin a pale, waxy yellow. He stood, leaning on a rifle like a cane, his chest wrapped in bloody bandages under his torn, expensive suit. He was coughing, a deep, wet, racking sound, but his eyes were alive, burning with a feverish, triumphant madness. More, he roared at his men. Spike it. We reach the river by sundown, or I will stop your pay and start your funerals. He saw them then, the two figures on horseback, silhouetted against the bright blue sky at the canyon's entrance. His men stopped working. They looked up. They saw the Navajo, slumped and bleeding, a ghost tied to his horse. And they saw the woman, the Red Witch. Thorne's mad confidence fractured. He had seen them fall into the river. He had shot the Navajo himself. They were dead. It is them, one of his men whispered, crossing himself. Ghosts! They have come back for us. They are flesh, Thorne roared, his voice cracking. They are flesh and blood, and they bleed $10,000 to the man who puts them down. The men looked at Thorne, then at the two silent, spectral figures. They looked at the boxes of dynamite, stacked neatly near the blasting site. They looked at the unnatural, still heat. This was a cursed place. One by one, they dropped their hammers. They began to back away, walking, then jogging, out of the canyon. They would not fight ghosts, not for Thorne's money. In 5 minutes, they were gone. It was just the three of them, Sarah, Cale, and Silas Thorne. Sarah dismounted. She walked to Cale's horse and, with a terrible, gentle strength, untied him and helped him down. He cried out, his legs buckling. She held him, his good arm thrown over her shoulder, his entire weight leaning on her. They stood together, two halves of a single, broken person. They began to walk, slowly, down the tracks. Thorne watched them come, his face a mask of disbelief and pure, undiluted hatred. He raised his rifle. I killed you, he hissed. I killed you. You missed, Sarah called out, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. They stopped, 20 feet from him. Cale was breathing in ragged, shallow gasps. It is over, Thorne, Sarah said. The judge has the ledgers. The marshals are coming. Your men are gone. It is not over. Thorne spat, the word turning into a bloody cough. It is not over until the last rail is spiked. This is my land. I bought it. I paid for it. He laughed, a high, thin, wheezing sound. This is the new world. Which money wins. Money always wins. This is land of money, not blood. Cale, who had been silent, his head bowed in pain, lifted his head. His eyes were clear. He was not a warrior. He was a judge. The land. Cale's voice was a low rasp, but it carried in the heat. It does not know your money, but it remembers every drop of blood. It remembers my wife. It remembers her father. It remembers Matthew Collins. And it will remember yours, Thorne shrieked. He lunged, not with the rifle, but with a long, heavy skinning knife he pulled from his belt. He was faster than a sick man should be. He drove at Cale. Sarah tried to move, to bring Cale's knife to bear, but she was trapped under his weight. Cale reacted. He did not fight. He fell. He used his last bit of strength to shove Sarah away from him and let his own body collapse. He fell backward, onto the tracks, pulling Thorne with him. Thorne, roaring in triumph, fell on top of him, raising the knife to plunge it into Cale's heart. He was straddling Cale, on the iron rails. He did not see where they had fallen. They were beside the neat stack of dynamite crates. They were beside the long, sputtering, white fuse that the blasting crew had lit before they fled. Cale saw it. Thorne raised the knife. Die! Savage, die knowing I won! Cale's good hand shot out. It did not grab Thorne's wrist. It grabbed a fistful of the sputtering fuse. The land remembers, Cale breathed, and he shoved the burning fuse, with its shower of sparks, directly into the open, splintered top of the nearest dynamite crate. Thorne's eyes went wide. He looked down. He saw the fuse. He saw the yellow sticks of powder. He screamed, a high, thin, terrified sound. Cale released him, pushing him. It is yours, he whispered. Thorne scrambled, trying to get away, but his feet tangled in the coils of fuse line. He looked at Cale, his face a mask of ultimate, understanding terror. Cale turned his head, looking down the track at Sarah, who was scrambling to her feet. Run, he commanded. No, Cale, she ran toward him. Run, he roared, with a last breath in his body. She knew she could not save him. She could only obey. She turned and ran, her legs pumping, tears of fury and grief blinding her. Cale lay on the track. He did not look at Thorne. He looked up at the patch of blue sky visible above the canyon walls. He thought of his mother. He thought of Tala. He thought of the scent of cedar and smoke. The world exploded. The blast was deafening, a monstrous, echoing crack that shattered the canyon. Rock, iron rails, and wooden ties were thrown thousands of feet into the air. The explosion tore the tracks from the earth, vaporized the dynamite, and buried Silas Thorne under half a mountain of his own ambition. The railroad syndicate project was over. The shockwave hit Sarah, throwing her off her feet, slamming her into the dirt. She was deafened, stunned. Silence fell, a long, ringing, absolute silence. The smell of sulfur and pulverized rock filled the air. Sarah pushed herself up. The smoke was thick, gray and yellow. She looked back. The track was gone. The canyon was choked with debris. She saw him. He had been thrown by the blast. 30 feet from where he had lain, he was on his back, in a patch of soft, red dust, almost peaceful. She ran to him. She fell to her knees, gathering him into her arms. Cale! Oh, God, Cale! He was not there. His body was a broken, ruined thing. The blast, on top of the bullet wounds, had taken everything. But his eyes were open. He was looking at her. He was alive. Barely. You ran, he whispered. He smiled, a faint, bloody grimace. I am here, she wept, holding him, rocking him. The red dust, warm from the sun, puffing up around them. I am here. Do not leave me. The land, he breathed. It is quiet. Yes, she sobbed, pressing her face to his. It is safe. You saved it. You saved us. His good hand, caked in mud and blood, came up. It was so heavy. He touched her cheek. His thumb brushed her skin. He inhaled, a long, slow, rattling breath. He was not smelling the sulfur. He was smelling her, the salt of her tears, the scent of her skin. "If this land," he whispered, his voice fading, "had a scent, you would be it." His hand fell, his eyes, fixed on her face, lost their light. He was gone. Sarah held him. She did not move. She sat in the ruined canyon, in the thick, sulphurous smoke and the warm, red dust. She held the man who had been her enemy, her captor, her teacher, and her guardian, and she cried. 1 month later, the air was clean, the sulphur was gone, washed away by the rains, scrubbed by the wind. The sky over Red Mesa was a high, brilliant blue, a color of forgetting. But the town did not forget. It rebuilt. But it rebuilt differently. The scars on the land and the people remained. The trial was short. It was held in the open air, in the ruined square, presided over by Judge Miles, with Silas Thorne's body buried under 100 tons of rock. The railroad syndicate offered no defense. The evidence Sarah had provided her father's journal, Thorne's letters, the true map, and Sheriff Collins's final ledger was absolute. The verdict was read to a silent crowd of settlers and, for the first time, Navajo, who stood listening from the edge of the square. The railroad syndicate was found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and the murder of John Coleman and Matthew Collins. The contracts were nullified. The land, the sacred land of the Canyon de Chelly, was not to be auctioned. It was to be returned, in part, to the Dine. The remainder, the ground that held the scars of the explosion and the graves of the settlers, was declared a federal preserve. It was a land that could no longer be bought or sold. It belonged to the memory of the blood that had been spilled on it. Sarah heard the news from Donna Rosa. She was not in the square. She was in the hidden canyon, the place of healing, where she had been for the entire month. She was sitting on the ground, changing a bandage. Cale Yazzie was alive. The 2 Navajo trackers had followed the explosion. They had found the ruin of the canyon, and they had found Sarah, holding his body. They had seen what she had not, a flicker of life, a breath so shallow it was barely wind. The blast, in a final, cruel miracle, had passed over him, the force of it cauterizing the terrible wound in his back, sealing it with fire even as it broke him. They had carried him, a man who was more spirit than flesh, back to the healing place. For 30 days, the medicine man had chanted, and Sarah had nursed. She had sat by his side, watching him, a man suspended between worlds. She had cleaned the 3 wounds, the bullet in his shoulder, the exit wound in his back, the burns from the blast. She had fed him water from a spoon, and then thin broth. She had watched the fever finally break, leaving him hollowed out, but present. He was sitting up now, leaning against the warm sandstone wall. His body was a roadmap of their journey. The wounds were no longer wounds. They were scars, deep, ropey, purpled scars that marked him, that defined him. They were, she thought, marks of destiny, the price he had paid for the land and for her. He was quiet. The warrior, the man of vengeance, had burned away in the explosion, leaving this man in his place, a man who was slower, who breathed with more difficulty, but whose eyes were clearer than they had ever been. Judge Miles came to the canyon 2 days after the verdict. He came with Donna Rosa, hat in hand. He did not come as a judge, but as a witness. "Miss Coleman," he said, bowing his head to her. "Judge," she replied. She was different, too. Her voice was quiet, steady. "It is done. The syndicate is broken. Their charter is revoked. The army has seized their assets." He looked at Cale, his expression one of profound respect. "The territory owes you a great debt, sir." Cale just nodded, his face unreadable. "There is the matter," the judge said, clearing his throat. Of Sheriff Collins. He held out his hand. Resting in his palm was the simple tin star that Matthew had worn. He died a hero. He saved Miss Coleman's life. And his ledger, it was the key. He left no family. But in his effects, he had written a will. It was simple. He left this, his badge, to the man who deserved it. The judge held the star out to Cale. I believe that man is you. The town needs a lawman. It needs a bridge. It needs you. Cale looked at the star, shining in the high desert sun. He looked at the judge, a good man, trapped in a system of paper. He looked at Sarah. He reached out his good hand and took the star. He closed his fist around it. I am not a lawman, he said, his voice a low rasp. I am not a man of towns. He held the star, the metal warming in his hand. But I will accept this as a promise, that the law will now protect all people, not just the ones who pay. He put the star down on the blanket beside him. It was not a badge of office, it was a symbol of justice, bought with blood. The judge nodded, understanding. There is one other matter. A Mexican trader named Miguel. He was apprehended near the border. He was carrying a bag of syndicate gold. Sarah looked up, her heart sinking. He did not resist. The judge continued. He gave up the gold freely. He said it was not his. He said it was for the people who cannot be bought. He left this. The judge handed a small, heavy leather pouch to Donna Rosa. It was full of gold coins. Miguel was gone, south, disappearing into Mexico. His debt paid, his books balanced. Cale and Sarah stayed in the canyon for another 2 weeks, until Cale could stand, and then walk, leaning on her shoulder. The Navajo people, his people, brought them food. They no longer saw him as a traitor. They saw him as the man who had faced the demon and won. They saw her as the woman who had brought the healing storm. When Cale was strong enough to sit on a horse, they rode back, not to Red Mesa, but to the small, rebuilt hogan of Donna Rosa, which she had offered them. A new council was formed, a meeting between the Navajo elders, Judge Miles, and the new town leaders. They formed a commission for the new preserve, the land that held the sacred canyons. They asked Cale to sit on it. He accepted. He was no longer a warrior. He was the bridge, the man who had been to the white man's hell and returned. He was the guardian. Sarah, too, found her place. It was not in the east. It was not in her father's past. It was here, in the new, raw future of this land, in a small, abandoned building that had once been the syndicate's land office. She swept out the broken glass and the dust. She put up a simple sign, Red Mesa School. All are welcome. She opened the doors. Her first students were the children of the settlers, the miners, and, walking shyly, holding hands, came 3 Navajo children, sent by Donna Rosa. They were the seeds of the future, a future where blood and paper did not matter as much as the simple act of learning. It was evening. A month had passed since the trial. The air was cool, smelling of juniper and the promise of a good, cold night. Sarah sat at a small, rough-hewn desk in the schoolhouse. She was writing a letter. She had no one to send it to, but she wrote it anyway. She was writing to her father. She looked out the open window. The sun was setting, painting the cliffs in shades of rose and deep violet. Dear Father, she wrote, her hand steady. I did not understand what you meant. When you wrote that the land would not forgive, I thought it was a curse. I was wrong. It was a promise. I have seen the anger of this place. I have seen the dust rise up to choke the greedy, but I have seen its mercy. 2, I have seen a flower grow from ashes. I have seen a man who was full of ghosts learn to live again. You loved this land, but you tried to cut it, to own it. That is not how it works. You cannot own it. You can only earn its respect. I am staying here. I am no longer your daughter, lost in the desert. I am a woman of this place. I know its smell. I know its heart. I have seen, Father, I have finally seen the tears of the land. She put the pen down. Outside, in the new green grass that had begun to cover the wagon ruts, a horse walked. Cale was riding. He was not riding fast. He was sitting tall in the saddle, his back rigid with the effort, the scars pulling, but he was riding. He was watching the sun go down, his face turned toward the canyons. His canyons. He was the guardian. The first stars appeared, the light of the new moon, a thin silver promise, spread over the high desert. It was not the west of guns and gold. It was the west of people, of survivors, of new green grass. It was a land of healing. The land healed. It was the only thing that was certain. The winds of the high desert, which had once carried the screams of the sandstorm, now carried the sound of children's voices from Sarah's schoolhouse. The earth, which had been stained with blood and sulfur, was covered again in the pale green of rabbit brush and the stubborn, hopeful shoots of new grass. Time did not erase the scars. It simply taught the land and the people how to live with them. Cale never regained the full strength of his left side. The bullet from Thorne's rifle, the one he had taken for her by the river, had left a deep, puckered reminder in his back. The blast in the canyon had deafened him in one ear. He walked with a limp, a slight, rolling gait that favored the leg that had been closest to the explosion. He was no longer a warrior. He was something more. He was a guardian. He sat on the porch of the small adobe home they had built with their own hands, near Donna Rosa's hogan. He was mending a bridle. His hands, once so quick with a knife, now patient and slow. The tin star Judge Miles had given him was not on his chest. It was nailed to the door frame of their house, a simple, glinting promise. He watched Sarah walk up the path from the schoolhouse. A year had passed since the explosion. She was no longer the pale, haunted girl from the east. The sun had browned her skin, and the wind had put a permanent, bright color in her cheeks. She wore a simple calico dress, and her father's journal, its pages now soft and worn, sat on the desk in her schoolroom. She smiled when she saw him. It was a simple, easy smile, one that reached her eyes. She sat on the step below him, leaning her head back against his knee. He stopped his work, his hand coming to rest on her hair. They sat in the comfortable silence of people who had seen the end of the world together. Donna Rosa's grandson read his first full sentence today, Sarah said, her voice quiet, content. He read from your mother's story, the one about the trickster coyote. Cale grunted, a soft sound. The coyote thinks he is clever, but the land is always more clever. He is a good boy, she said. He has his grandmother's eyes. He has his father's spirit. Cale replied. He will be a good leader. They watched the sun begin its long, slow descent, painting the high cliffs in strokes of orange and deep purple. The air was cool, carrying the scent of juniper and the faint, dusty smell of the red earth. The railroad was gone. The syndicate's name was a curse. Judge Miles had seen to it. The land was quiet, belonging only to the sky, and to the people who knew how to listen to it. The turquoise stone, his mother's stone, now hung around Sarah's neck, a piece of the sky resting against her skin. They had found a new life, not in the ashes of the old, but in the new, fertile ground the ashes had left behind. The hate that had fueled Cale, the warrior, had been burned away in the blast. The fear that had defined Sarah, the survivor, had been washed clean by the river. He looked down at her, his hand still on her hair. He remembered her, a trembling girl in the dark, her hands slick with his blood, her lips finding his. He remembered her voice, shaking but fierce, telling him she was not running. He was a man who had been hollowed out by grief. She was a woman who had been emptied by fear. And here, in the middle of nowhere, they had filled each other up. The smell of their small supper fire began to drift from the chimney, the smell of cedar and roasting corn. It was the smell of home, amidst the scent of red earth and the lingering memory of ash. He took a deep breath. It was a breath of peace, of acceptance, a breath he had not been able to take in 10 years. She heard it. She felt the release of the tension that still lived in his shoulders. She turned, looking up at him, her hand coming to rest on his scarred chest. She smiled, her eyes clear and steady, holding his. She leaned in, whispering the words that had started it all, the words that had been a delirious truth and were now a simple, profound fact. You smell like my type. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to connect with all of you. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to my channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support the channel, please hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.